And the first item is the consideration of the minutes from the Budget Committee meeting on May 16, 2018. Do we have corrections or a motion to approve? These good
Well,
things.
I thought they were, I wanted to commend you, Jennifer. I think you did a great job on these.
There was something that I had sent Jennifer. Did something get changed in the minutes?
So what I did change is on the affordable housing section, on page 3. The conversation was about the tiny homes projects, and I referenced park model homes, and then in parentheses I put tiny homes. So that way there was clarification.
Well, what made me to think of it is, it says here that in response to Bertolotti's comment, from an investment standpoint, this is a terrible model. There's no indication as to what he's referring to. And then I said, Vedder replied, and I was referring to this tiny homes, but if you read this, you had no idea what I or Mr. Bertolotti was referring to.
So if Mr. Bertolotti is okay, I can say Bertolotti's comment from an investment standpoint is that the terrible model for park homes.
Right. I mean,
It's not
Financially,
Yeah,
Yeah,
financially.
financial.
Financially.
Right.
yeah.
I'd say terrible financial model.
No, you're not. For tiny homes or for park model homes.
regarding tiny homes, regarding park.
So we're going to add that. Is there any other changes to the minutes?
Yes, I would like to see that change added, yes.
Okay.
We have a motion to approve with that change made.
I move that we approve my agenda with the amendments.
You mean the minutes, Mike?
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Public comment. Is there anybody in the audience who'd like to make a comment about the budget or the process we're going through? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item. Bruce, you want to talk about funding options?
Thank you. They don't let me get close to technology, so we probably need to run this. But I want to talk about a couple of options that have come up since the last meeting that we had, and some adjustments that we're going to recommend. But first I want to go through some of the budgetary concerns that I presented earlier, because the budget is the most important policy document or policy decision that the council will make in a year, and I want to go through and say these are the kind of things that I was addressing. So starting with it, we talked about the low general fund balance. We want funding for lean times, funding for emergencies. We were also using it to offset the visitor center costs, and the better the fund balance or the higher the fund balance, the more flexibility you have. Next is visitor center funding, because the recommended budget that you have recommends that the split between the general fund and the promotion fund is $40,000 and $120,000. And those are the two likely places that this can get funded. One of them can fund 100%, one of them can fund half, or however we want to do it. But that's something that needs to be addressed. It's a difficulty from these, and I know that the difficult position that puts the chamber in, but the city is in a similar position in that if we're talking about an ending fund balance, down below $200,000, that just puts it almost down. We might as well be at zero. So that's just a tough decision that has to be made. So that's one. Next, if you could scroll it up, please. Next is the general fund reserve. There, we'll over there. Next is the general fund reserve. We will have, if we put the $400,000 that's referenced in the strategic plan, we will have $1.3 million in that reserve. But it's really not a general fund reserve. It is a facility relocation reserve, which means if we were to use, right now, if we were to do a project, we have 1.3 million for the relocation of buildings. If we did that, then we then have a zero balance in our general fund for the reserve. So that allocation, well, there's money there, it has a particular set aside. Move it up a little bit. Talked about the emergency management shortcomings, that there's gaps, that there's a lack of follow-up on the items that we've undertaken so far. There's a question about, does a community with high standards need to enforce and protect those standards from a community, from a code enforcement projection? And then also funding for eligible projects, and there's several, but one of them, as an example, I've heard a lot of discussion about Cannon Beach Elementary and whether or not it can be converted into an event center. And right now, we have no money to consider that at all. However, if there was funding available, we could potentially be talking about, converting it into an event center. But that's one that we don't have those that kind of flexibility. And this is one that's particularly important to me. I've managed another community similar to Cannon Beach and been around other ones. I think it's critical that we, invest in items that define the community. In our case, I think it's arts, it's public spaces, it's the beach, the environment, those kinds of things. And I think that you can avoid investment in those for a while, but at some point you're going to say, wait a second, somehow we slipped. I don't think you can ride on your reputation for a long time. You have to make those investments. So, a couple recommendations for funding. Number one, just to bring in additional funds, there was discussion about transfer from the RV park. And Lori and I have looked at it and think we could do $200,000 as a transfer into the general fund. That would raise all the, whatever the balances we're working with, by $200,000. I would consider this a one-time transfer. It may be possible to do it again next year, but there's a lot of things have to happen. We have to have, profits, or no extraordinary costs, those kinds of things. But we can do that this year to go ahead and offset, some shortage in the general fund. Another one is just to change the designation of the general fund reserve to something more general. So just by changing that designation, we suddenly have a true $1.3 million reserve in the general fund. Now what that means is if we do any buildings, talk about relocating any kind of facilities, we're going to have to find another funding source, probably bonding or something, but we won't have these funds available right there to go ahead and do it. So that's an offset on it. But in my opinion, I would rather have that to deal with down the road than to say that we've got this, we essentially have a zero fund balance because this money is allocated for something else. So I think that that's is a good trade-off. The next thing, fine. Okay, this is one that I think is going to raise some eyebrows. It's increased the TRT by 1%. And what, again, remembering the things that I'm trying to accomplish, or I set out to accomplish with the budget, the idea is that 100% would be retained by the city. The control of it would be 100% to the city. And the first thing, actually, can you bring up the photograph? But before, as you're bringing up the photograph, I have to first of all apologize to George. As a photographer, this is the best I could do. And so I'm deeply embarrassed, and I'm not sure what the little
Accepted.
Spotlights are up there. But if we were to do that, and this is the 1%, and this is $140,000, which is the estimate of the 30% as if it was this year, that $140,000 would go straight to the general fund to increase that balance. So that would be the 400 plus the 140. Then there is the $385,000. That would stay with the city, and then it would go to a particular set of uses. Number one, we would fund the visitor center right away out of that. So the $160,000 goes in to fund the visitor center. That takes the pressure off between the general fund and the promotions fund down here. With that, that makes the promotions fund whole. Again, they would be back up at the $385,000. I wouldn't say they're caveats, but they're conditions I think that we've all been looking towards, is number one, we would need to find the number we were talking about. In my opinion, and I was reluctant to make the transfer of the visitor center to them, but we didn't have the ability to do it within the general fund. My thought is that if we took 160 or 120 or whatever, I think that probably puts them lower than what we should fund them, because we want them to be wildly successful. So we want to make sure we're providing enough funds. I think the number is going to result in being too low. This would put the 385 back, and I don't know what the number is, but just to make my math easy, if there's $385,000 collected this year, and the number, and I'm basing this on nothing, the number was 300, then we would be able to go ahead and fund that, and that would be what they would get, at least in the first year. Then, the difference would go to a reserve. The reserve would be controlled by council, but would be available to the chamber if they have, another opportunity, or there's a reason they want to go a little bit higher than 300 in a particular year or something. And again, the 300 is not a static number. It would have to be adjusted, just like everything else that we do. But whatever was left over would go into a reserve. I think the reserve is important because they're doing a really good job marketing right now, and they're marketing to what the current environment is, where people are free to travel, that sort of thing. But if there was a major change in the economy, and that situation changed, if we haven't set money aside, and if they haven't set money aside, then we wouldn't have, it would be very difficult to go ahead and change the marketing to something that could work better for the current conditions. So I'm always in favor, especially if it's your primary source of income, that you have a B plan if something was to occur, and that would be to go ahead and have this reserve. Now, as far as the $385,000, we've already taken 160 to go ahead and put that into to fund the visitor center. I talked earlier about the Cannon Beach Elementary. If it was to be an event center is something that is allowable to be funded out of the tourist tax, the transient tax. So that's something that all of a sudden we can have a discussion about, because we have a potential funding source. That's one part. The other, I think was the last item that I discussed, was the ability to invest in what's important, or what we see as our brand, again, which I think is public spaces, art, those sort of things. That those funds, and it's not a slam dunk, and I will go through and read what the law says about it, but those kind of things could potentially be funded by it. Possibly on the park side, there might be funding to do something with to finally be able to move forward some with the park master plan. There's also the possibility that we haven't looked at everything that can be funded, because we've not had those funds available to the city. Those funds have gone to our promotion partner. But if those funds were available, it's possible that some, or a good portion of Haystack Rock appreciation. Awareness. Oh my, sorry. Gotta get that one right. Okay, but the appreciation program, that's potentially, and that is a huge tourist draw for us. And potentially some of those costs could be, offset or taken from the general fund and put into a fund like that. And there may be other things that we do. So that's just another place where the funding could come from. And in order to, what I would try to do is, or recommend, is that we would leverage that. And so if we were going to do something like the Cannon Beach Elementary, or if we were going to do something with the Parks Master Plan or something along those lines that would be more of a longer term sort of a project, then I would probably recommend that we would use those funds to bond the projects and make the bond payments with it. Otherwise, if it's going to be something like to pay for HRAP or something else that's going to be a direct cost, we would have to go ahead and take it direct. Those funds could also be accumulated, could go and assist in this reserve. But I think that there are possibilities. On it down here. If you go to the next, no, I'm sorry. we are a well-oiled machine, we are in administration. Okay, well, this is the definition of tourism-related facility. And it gives two things. It says a conference center, convention center, visitors information center. We understand that part. This part where it says and, in what does and mean? Should it mean or whatever? Because this is an entirely different use, but it says or other improved real property that has a useful life of 10 or more years and has a substantial purpose of supporting tourism and accommodating tourist activities. I contacted the League of Cities, and they published a document called The Legal Guide to Collecting Transient Lodging Tax in Oregon. And they talk a little bit about this portion, but they go on to say is that unfortunately the law does not provide any additional guidance on what constitutes other improved real property that has a useful life of more than 10 years, blah, blah, blah. So this is up for interpretation. It's if we decide to look going down this road, that's something that we can deal more with League of Cities, potentially contact the Lodging Association to see what their position would be on it if we were to take that. It's certainly more in line with the direct intention of this than some other communities that are using it to pave roads and other things. So I'm relatively confident that we would be able to go ahead and come to some sort of an agreement on that. But so that is the what I would propose as a funding plan that would go ahead and cover everything that we have in the budget. If you go back to the picture again, one of the things that that's a big pill to swallow. But without that, a lot of these other things aren't funded. We're back in trying to go ahead and sort out the visitor center funding. We don't have funding for something like an event center again, that sort of thing. So what I was trying to do here was to put together a funding plan. Didn't cost the businesses directly, although I recognized that it would have to be put on top of the 8% that we have now. And it would not require any kind of a cost increase or another increase for any kind of service or something for the residents. So that's hopefully what this does. It gives us some leeway. It allows us to go ahead and build up our reserve, as we were talking about before. So right now, I would be happy to answer any questions you have about the plan, but I would rather we hold off discussion about whether it's something we want to move forward with until we get to the end of the budget assessment, decide where we are, and then say, does this work, does this help, is it not necessary? I'd rather not have that discussion until we actually finish up what we're going to be talking about from a budget standpoint. So are there any questions?
Yes, I do have a question, Bruce, on this is on the RV park, $200,000.
Yes.
Does that take up all of any all of any, not reserve, but contingency?
It leaves 100,000.
It still leaves
More than
100,000?
100,000. It's like
I think
150,000.
it was 325,000.
Yeah.
Plus 100,000 that was transferred to the reserve fund.
Right. So it'd be about 225,000 is still there.
So there still is some contingency left, okay.
Yes. Jim?
What's the protocol or process that the chamber would use if they had to tap that other new reserve?
To get to, okay, and you have to spin it, we know which one that was. But they would just come to the council,
I see.
because, and then just say, this is what we're trying to do.
So the council would tap the reserve, not the chamber.
Yes, it would be controlled by the council, but available to the chamber.
Thanks.
Would it be available for anybody else, or was it just specifically for the chamber?
That fund, I would keep specifically to the chamber. But, we still have the TAF fund, and that's available for people that want to apply that sort of thing.
George, your question is on page 65. 329,000 is the contingency that's there now.
Does that include the transfer?
No, and
No, that's after the transfer. So you make the 120,000 transfer to the reserve, you still have 329,000. If you took 200,000 out, it would leave 129,000 in contingency.
Or we could not make the transfer to the RV Park Reserve, which may be a better solution, since then you have more contingency on hand for things that may come up.
We can figure out the mechanics. I was just talking, remember, I'm a concept guy.
I know you are, and
Josh, you're not.
I'm a detail girl.
Where do I have? Some of us are.
Okay, if there's no more questions, let's turn the lights back up and we can commence with our deliberations. Thank you.
So the next agenda item is the discussion regarding funding of the visitor center. And the proposal at this point is to cut about, it's about $160,000, or $120,000 actually, off of what they would have gotten a year ago.
Yes. So if the 120,000 would be, come from the chamber, I'm assuming it would come from the promotion budget, and then the city would say 40.
But you still have that as a TBD in your,
That's not in, yeah, that's not in the budget. The 40's not in the budget.
you have a note that says we'll require $40,000 from the general fund with a source of TBD. Yeah,
But it's not. It's not there.
right.
Well, the issue
I
is,
understand.
the issue is that a year ago, we gave them
200 to say.
140, is that right? Did we give them 140 last year?
Yes.
Plus the,
And they took the data.
plus the full amount of the transient room tax, or 70%. So this year, we're just proposing giving them the 70% and not the 140. So that's the issue on the table.
That's the way the budget was written.
Yeah, I mean, that's the issue on the table, right? I think we need discussion on, if anybody has any ideas, if that's fair or not fair. The chamber came back to us with a number saying if you're going to cut the money back, do it over a 3-year period.
And also, if I can, when the decision was made, and again, I remember when we did the budget, actually, we said it would be the 160. But subsequent to that, we're making a recommendation that we transfer $200,000 from the RV park. So that makes our situation a little bit different as far as some of the flexibility that we may have.
But I think the bottom line that we need to determine as a budget committee is the proposed budget calls for a substantial cutback in what the chamber's getting. Are we all in support of that, or do we think we need to be a phased-in cut, or we have some discussion?
I would like to see the chamber's promotion figure stay at $250,000 at least going forward. So if you assume a 384, and you take 130 off of that, I guess they would still stay at around 250. But I think that that's the minimum that we should have them investing to keep our transit room tax coming in.
So George, the 384, then you're saying they need a minimum of 250 for their promotion program, and then that leave 134 that would go to the visitor center?
I think that could work for this year. I think, the following year, they're probably going to need more than 250. It's a pretty new program, so the chamber is just learning and experimenting with their advertising. They did invest in a new website, so that money has been spent, and they've also invested in the branding, and that is an expense they won't have to have for another 5 years probably, at least. So I think that 250 would probably be fine for this coming year, and probably something more than that the following year. And I do think that we should keep the contracts separate. That's a different issue, but I don't think that there should be one single contract. I think they're two very different operations, the running the information center versus the promotion program.
Okay, so if I can restate that, you want to leave the number the same that's in the budget, the 384, not increase it, not decrease it. Allocate 250 to the promotion plan, 134 to the visitor center. Do we want to look at doing the full 160 to the visitor center, or do we, if we have the money in the general fund or not?
Wherever the money comes from, it's, as long as there's still 250 left for promotion, then I think, we're okay for the coming year.
Okay. So do we have a consensus around the table that George's number is reasonable, or?
I'm kind of confused. So what exactly does the percentage?
They're saying
They
160.
use 160. So we all agree that somehow or another you have to have the 160 for this.
So we'd
It
have
would
to,
have to be something.
we'd have to put another 26,000 in there from somewhere.
Right.
Yes.
Far be it from me to disagree with George, because he's taught me so much about business here, but I would say, that even though I was the one that made this transfer out initially, I think that, as I said, the budget was in a different situation than we are now. And the recommendation to repurpose, I guess you would call it, the reserve, and then moving $200,000. My concern is that I'm very reluctant to try to go ahead and cut them too short. And I don't know if 250 is the right number. I don't know if it's another number. I think that we need further discussion with that. But I think that we have a vested interest in them being wildly successful with their promotions, because it's our primary funding source. So, and I know it sounds like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. One was, trying to go ahead and, I ride for the brand for the city, to try to go ahead and make the, to take care of the general fund and those kinds of things. But I think there's been a couple of changes that I think that we should be more, I would say, the word would be conservative with hedging our bets on their success. And so I believe, I have nothing really to base it on other than that I believe that number probably should be higher and would be a reasonable investment or a risk for us to take, as opposed to not receiving what we might receive in our total receipts.
I guess I would, moment, not sure I agree totally with that. Because I went to, instead of coming up to 250, I used 284 to be track 100,000 as much as anything. But I was surprised and pleased for the Chamber's willingness to try to work with us by scaling it down, which tells me there is room in their budget to work with them. Maybe not their desire, maybe not the effective long-term approach to continue to promote it. But on the other side, I see, and I'll respond to my own and many citizens' observations, we don't need to promote anymore. And I think that's an exaggeration. We do need to promote, but we need to continue to promote at a higher and higher level when we see the issues, overcrowding, traffic backed up to the junction, people getting irritated because it's overcrowded. And this is not just a summer issue. We've had it during this month. Been real serious overcrowding issues. One of the hotels that we were getting irate. They came off season, so if they could, enjoy the quality that they have here and start to look like summer year round. So I just really question, we need to continue that high level of promotion. I guess I recognize that it generates trips back, but the only way you really look at that is to get more rooms. They're filling rooms up. Maybe some of the hospitality people would argue with that. sitting here telling me that they need more and more and more, when I hearing people saying enough is enough. And I'm not saying that, I think proposal, budget cutting back that far is too much. And I was pleased to hear him say, well, okay, we'll work with you. I want to penalize anybody. I'm thinking that at least this go around, until we truly know whether we have an extra 1%, right now we'll address that later. I think we go more than 284, and then pull, say we had the RV park reserve, we could pull from. I think we can still make the budget work on that basis. And then make that change now, and then look at the 1%, see if we want to adjust it. But I don't think we need to adjust it. I think, I'm still going to be in favor of the 1%, because all the other things we do for improving the quality of tourists and residents in this town.
So Mike, are you proposing 284? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, that was just the number I used, but it's arbitrary, it's 250.
Okay.
But, you know,
Well, I'd like to, say something on top of Mike's there. I too feel that the best advertising for any business in any town is a satisfied customer. It's people coming to this community and going away and being totally impressed and telling their friends and family about what a great place Cannon Beach is. So I think the better we can, the more attractive and beautiful and art and nature and the things that we value here, the more we can enhance that, then the more people we draw who like that, and their friends are going to be like them also. They're going to send people here who also appreciate the same kind of thing. I think we certainly need new people once in a while. We can't just rely on on that. So we need to bring some new people in once in a while, and that's where the promotion program comes in. It makes people aware of the community who don't know anybody who's ever been here. And I think there is value in that, and making them long time and repeat people to visit us. But I do feel that it makes a lot of sense that we make our community more attractive and not spend all of our promotion money on bringing new people in.
when we talk about public art, we're not just talking about statues in the park, but it's also performing arts, concerts in the park, night movies in the park, programs at the Coaster Theater that the city can utilize its funds for and continue to make this a really attractive place to live. I think so.
I want everybody to take note. I agree with Mike 100%. Just kind of unusual. Yeah, I'm going back to page number 1 of the council priorities. The 4 bullet points, I'm referring this specific topic to those 4 bullet points. To me, part of the discussion of what we're doing, and the 3rd bullet point where it says Cannon Beach continues to be an attractive, healthy, safe, and livable place for all. And then the last one is expressed citizen interest. So I agree with Mike. I think there is too much emphasis based on overt advertising. Cannon Beach does not need overt advertising. It has a wealth of advertising just by being here. The Rock is seen worldwide without any need to send out marketing plans and stuff like that. I think there was also quite a sense within the community of, and I got a lot of it, disappointment with the marketing documents that came out. The branding. That was an expensive process that I think was wholly unnecessary. So I don't now trust that system. I trust the chamber, the people that are in it, that work there, are great. And I think we should make sure that they work and do what they can. And but I want to be the money that we are giving them through our taxes. I almost feel like it needs some oversight. So that's within the contract, and that will be negotiated with the contract. So I guess that's my sense of it.
I'm looking at George's. George, you're still on the board of the chamber? Or the management board?
I'm on the marketing committee.
Okay. But I'm hearing George say that they can do with less money. And basically.
I'm not speaking for the marketing committee, I'm speaking for myself when I say that.
Yeah, but I think that you carry some weight here. And to me, anyway, you carry some weight. And I think that, Bruce's budget called for a pretty drastic cutback. You're saying 250 for the marketing plan, and then if we can come up with 160 for the visitor center, which most would be funded from the transient tax, we'd end up with about 26 out of the general fund. I would think with the other things that Bruce has proposed and what we're going to discuss tonight, that we could probably do that. Does that make sense to everybody, that we kind of look at those as the numbers that we're going to propose for the chamber?
I don't think it would be fair to take the whole big hunk, the 160 out in 1 year. I mean, that's a lot for somebody to have to adjust. If we can't give them what they're asking and they can do with less, then, that's great. But let's do it a little more gently than take such a huge chunk out of their operation.
Well, I guess what I'm kind of interested in is, you talked about some of these being one-time costs, the cost of the website, for example, the cost of the branding campaign. So based on that, you're saying that 250 would work, right? Because you're not going to be doing a new website every year. You're not going to be doing new branding every year. So I guess the question is, you really need the level of funding that you've had in this year going forward.
Yeah, the website, it is true that the initial, setup and, getting it set up is the major expense, but there is considerable amount of upkeep to, a website like that. And there is actually a contract with the company that's developing it, it's an ongoing contract to pay them to keep it active and functioning well. So, but still not at the same level.
Right.
I would agree with Sharon that it seems like a big chunk to take in 1 year, a big step function, and that something a little more gentle might be a better approach.
Yes.
Can I say something?
Yes.
I kind of, the two sides of this, one, I want to make the budget balanced, the other, I want to make sure we have revenue from our partners. So, in understanding the points about trying to go into this a little bit more slowly, with the transfer that we're anticipating from the RV park, and me trying to hedge our bets as far as what we'll be looking at next year. Like this year, we looked at a $50,000 increase, which puts us in a nice position, and it kind of did that for several of our the 1%. And the numbers that we're talking about is kind of all of us are working on a gut feel. But I think I would lean towards hedging our bets, and then having the number be 300, and see how it happens with the 300. It's less than what it was last year. We then split the cost of the center, unless we do this, but we could split the cost of the center out of the 200. We could pay the 80, but I'm really reluctant to go too far, and then have the next year say, oops. I think we can look at it again next year, see how it goes, and then see if there's the number changes. But
that would be less than what you have budgeted right now. You have 384 budgeted.
No, I think he's saying 300.
no, I'm saying that they would get 300.
For tourism promotion?
Yes, for promotions, instead of a number like 200. Right now, I think
264.
it's if we do it,
You had
maybe
100,
the whole thing.
you had 120 and 284.
No, he wants 80.
No, but that's what he had in the budget.
Right.
So now you're saying 380 total to the chamber. Is that
No,
correct?
no, I'm saying 80 would come to fund half the visitor center. The remainder would go to them for promotions, Because if we're going to change anything and be gradual, I'd rather be gradual on, the revenue side to see, make sure that we're still in good shape as opposed to do an experiment that is more drastic.
Okay, but where's the other 80 gonna come from?
From the
That's
general
gonna-
fund.
Yeah.
There's another 80 that they need for the visitors.
So
Where's
you're
that coming?
saying that's
No,
gonna come
they
from
would-
there?
There's 384,000, whatever, I'll say 380 because it's easy for me to do the
Right,
math.
okay.
So then, right now, or what's happened in the past is they receive the entire amount. What I'm saying now is if there's 380, if it works out to be 384 or 380 or whatever, the 80 would be used for their portion to fund the visitor center. They would get the whole 300 to do the promotions, to hedge our bets to make sure that we're gonna be in good shape next year. And then our 80 would come from the RV park.
So basically, what you're saying, what you've got in the budget, you proposed that we would give them 40, now you're saying we give them 80 instead of the 40. And instead of them coming up with 120, it would just be 80.
No.
No,
No, we would fund the whole thing. He's
they
saying
get the
380
whole
from,
160.
he's saying from the transient tax, they get the 384,
Right.
okay?
Okay?
300 of it goes to
Promotion.
the promotion. 84 goes to the visitor center.
Right.
And
Yeah.
76, we take 76 out of the general fund.
Yeah, that's what I said, because what the proposal was there was going to be 40 coming out of the general fund or someplace, and now we're saying it was going to be more like 80 that's coming out of the.
Yeah, compared to the original budget.
So the,
you're
so
talking
the
about-
visitor center gets their 160.
Yeah.
However, we're gonna give
Yeah,
it to them,
yeah.
where we're gonna get it.
Yeah,
But the promotion
it's 300.
goes down a little bit.
Goes
Yeah.
down, yes. It was 330 last year, and then
Yeah.
it went up 50,
Okay.
so
Yeah,
get it to 300.
yeah.
But I think the visitor center is important because that's employees and that's, yeah,
That's
that's,
fully funded.
So we're funding, so the proposal from Bruce is 384,000 of the transient tax, 300 goes to marketing, 84 goes to the visitor center, 76 has to come from the general fund to fully fund the visitor center.
I can
Is
be on
that-
board with that.
Kind of make sense with
Yeah.
everybody?
It's a kind of halfway point between the counter proposal and the.
Is there a discussion, or can we all nod if that's?
Can you recap that again for me?
Sure.
Can you say it the same way twice?
Yeah, I can say it. So we have $384,000 of revenue that's coming in from the 1% tourism tax. That
From the
goes-
new 1%,
That's the 70% of
the
1%.
old 1%.
That's 70% of 1%.
This does not contemplate anything that we talked about before, Jim.
And that, last year we gave that all to the chamber, the whole thing.
Okay.
Plus we funded the visitor center. This year we're proposing, based on what Bruce just said, of the 384, we'll give 300 to the marketing program. We'll give 84,000 to the visitor center. That uses up the whole transit tax. And then we have to come up with 76,000 out of the general fund that'll fully fund the visitor center to 160.
Now, just so we explore all alternatives, another option would be to put some of that 380 or some of that 300 into a reserve that could be spent when and if it seemed deemed necessary or important.
So make 50 of it allocable by the city council?
That's an alternative. It's just a possibility, if we're exploring all our different avenues.
Okay. Well, it sounds like we kind of have an agreement here. Does everybody buy off on that? Does that sound reasonable, or is there other comments?
So basically, instead of the 384, 655 that we had proposed, we're now giving them 460.
Well,
You're all
I understand, no, because if you look at it from last year,
The grand
we're getting
total.
490, because you're talking about, you're adding the visitor center on.
Right.
So we're reducing our expenditure of the visitor center. So, yes, when you're looking at the total, I think that it's less than last time, but, maybe not by a lot. But, and to George's point, being the one that's got to make this thing balance, I would hedge my bets with them and just say it's 300, and then we can talk about either this proposal or something else to build a reserve later. But I'm afraid if we try to do too much with the funds the first year, that I don't want it to show up in a reduced number next year. So I would rather give them the flexibility. And I think that they understand in the conversations I've had that they need to, be frugal and take a look at some of the stuff that they've done in the past, they don't have to repeat, that sort of thing.
Yeah, if they've got this year to think about reductions for next year, that, they can do a lot that way, but to
Well, and the
just spring it
proposal-
on
They
them.
proposed back to us that we could cut that back by, over a 3-year period, that they could do with less money each year over the next 3 years. So-
Right, this will give
Richard,
them time.
can
to
we
make
have
the
our chamber director have a little second here? He's been wanting to get something out.
Well, George, you had mentioned 250 as a number.
Jim,
for-
could I just ask you to go up so we can get everything on the record? Thank you. We can let him sign in later.
Yeah. So you had mentioned 250 as the proposed amount that you think is good for the promotion program. So for me, I would want some clarification on that. Chris is sitting here as our destination marketing specialist, which we hired specifically to manage our marketing efforts. Does that include his salary or exclude his salary? So are you thinking that 250 is just for promotion? Or does that include his salary? Because then that will,
Jim, we're talking 300 now, so I don't think
Yeah.
it's...
well, it hasn't been clear to me whether you're including the administrative costs that it takes the chamber staff to manage all of this.
Okay. I guess what...
Yeah.
So that's,
How did you do it last year?
It's the same as last year. What happened, I think the difference from your standpoint is that last year you had up to 330. And so what you're going to have is 300 now, so it's maybe a 10% difference. The funds that are, you can pay part of it. Part of it came from the fact that you guys were wildly successful, so that was another 50. So your real net difference this year for the same kind of expenses you had is $30,000. So, and I don't want anything to happen.
yeah.
So Annette,
I've had both Laura and Chris wondering how this is going to play out because their jobs depend on this funding. So I'm more concerned about making sure my staff is here and in place for me. I don't want to lose any of them. They're great.
I want you to.
Part of our proposal, I think, when we came and said we can take this, is that that was tied to the percentage of the transient lodging room tax. We believe that our efforts that we've put in have shown great improvement. We just got the check today and a 16% increase over last year for January, February, March. Excellent increase in the transient taxes. We're willing to take that as long as there's a percentage tied with that, because we think we're going to continue to grow that in the future, and therefore we will make up that difference in the future. So if we continue on a double-digit pace of increase with the lodging tax, that proposed shortcoming for us in the short term will be made up in the long term, as long as that's a percentage. If you set it at 300,000, then we're there, and that's all it's going to be until we review this contract. So as long as it's with the tax and it can continue to grow as the city grows and our efforts grow, I think we can do that.
Are we saying 300,000 flat, like you're saying?
Well-
Or are we saying
I think this
300,000
is
for
this
this
year,
year?
as far as I'm concerned.
I was seeing it as this year, as 300,000.
Yeah, I don't think anybody was
And Jim,
making that.
Well, I'm just want to make sure that it's very clear, because
the next item is about our contract.
Mhm.
And with this, what I would recommend is that there probably is a baseline, and I'm sympathetic to the request that you folks have about doing a multi-year contract. And there's probably some long-term things that you can do that you want to commit to, but I don't think you have to commit all of it. So we could probably set a baseline if you were to come in and say, these are the things that we want to be able to go ahead and do in advance. Then we've got that as a baseline. And then we've got another number that's going to be more of the discretionary side. And that's what it's going to be for that year. And then the next year, we're talking, what's the cost of the same kind of things that you were doing for your baseline and your long-term commitments? And then what else are you trying to do? And then that would establish what the number is.
Mhm.
That gives you the opportunity to do something special if you want to. It gives us a high end, the top number, if there is nothing, that changes. And gives you the flexibility of a multi-year contract. So we're trying, I mean, in my mind, I'm trying to go ahead and find some way to go ahead and work that sort of thing out, but I think that it would be difficult, for example, if the number's 300, and we say, well, it'd be 300, and then we'll do that for 3 years with a 10% increase each year. I don't think the appetite is here for that. But I think that there's something, and again, our interests are tied to yours, that we can find some way to go ahead and make that work. And I would not want to recommend anything that would result in any of your people losing their jobs, because they do a really good job.
Yes, yeah.
So I agree with that. So that's, we'll get into that conversation again. We still have to do those negotiations. I think we're just trying to go ahead and sort out the, I guess by making the decision on the visitor center, we're kind of doing another answer, but I wanted to make sure we had that, there was enough there to be able to go ahead and move forward. But your net loss, your net difference that you're going to have to make up on the promotion side, and you make the decisions as far as your employees and things like that, there's going to be a difference of $30,000 this year.
Right.
A difference of 30?
Well, this year they had 330. That's how
Oh,
much
you,
came in.
compared to last year.
Next year, we're saying, let's go ahead and we'll go with 300 is another number to, as a step down. That's the difference. What they had this year is, going into the next year is 30,000.
Actually, the last year's budget was 359. I don't know if we actually spent that.
Did we end up at 330?
It's 359 and 140 for the
It's
visitors.
359, whatever's in the budget.
But I mean, how much, as far as our collections, well, we're not to the end of the year yet.
No, we don't know yet.
But,
Anyway, we had budgeted 140 for the visitor center and 359 for the promotion program. So we're talking this year, if we go back to this page, 50, actually page 56, we would put 84,000 in the line for the visitor center and 300,000 for the promotions, and then we'd have to add something in the general fund of 76,000.
I guess I'm just concerned that this is just a money-making enterprise. They get everything they can generate. Whatever they generate, they get for promotion, that generates more. I don't see
That's
anything.
why that 1% was added was,
Well, they added 1%, I get it, but where it is right now.
that last 1%, I mean, was
Yeah.
chamber.
So if it's always dedicated to chamber operations and promotion, next year, there's more visitors and they get more money. It's like, we get the money, we gotta spend it. It sounds like government to me. I think we ought to say this with them.
They're
This is
managing
what you
the
need.
promotion now.
This
They're
is what you
managing
need.
it, targeting it.
And
They're not
if
just,
if we're successful, you're successful, and we generate surplus revenue, then that goes into the fund for the other tourism-related facilities and events and so forth. I don't know, I'm just hearing that they get everything, and next year they'll get everything, you know.
Well, I think
I don't see a limit.
the idea is, though, that we want to cut and not give them any from the general fund over the next 2 or 3 years. We want that to be zero. So they still get the 1%, 70% of 1%, but they get zero from the general fund.
Okay, let me
Does
just.
that make sense, Mike? I mean,
Yeah,
that's-
no, you're right on that, but that number, the dollar amount just grows and grows and grows. And the more it grows, the more marketing, more advertising, more staff. None of these going back to the village, to the quality that we want the tourists to come to see.
So the cap shouldn't be a percentage, it should really be a dollar value.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not a percentage, which is gonna, as you say, increase year to year based on.
But as a city council, you guys also have the authority to amend that ordinance, just like what Bruce is proposing with the next 1%, if you do that, where you could amend that how you spend that 70% of 1% on the second 1%.
But that doesn't say that the money has to go to destination marketing or to the visitor center. It just says it shall be used for tourism promotion or tourism-related facilities. It's pretty broad in that
Pretty
one,
broad.
that it doesn't mean
It
it
doesn't
has to go.
require an amendment.
Right.
Ryan, can I address your point? Last year, I think they got, I forgot what the previous year was, maybe that was a 330 or the 300 year. And my understanding was we're projecting 330 this year, it might be higher. but they're not getting it all, because we're projecting 385. And so right from the top, we're saying, 85 or 84 of it is not going to be there. And last year, you had 330, or whatever the number is, and this year it's going to be 300. So we are holding them to a certain number. We're reducing the amount that we spend on promotions by not going ahead and saying you get the whole 85 or whatever it is, taking that and then sharing the cost of the visitor center, because there's a benefit to both parties. They're working with less this year than they were the previous year. In the way I keep referring to this something as the number. What's the right number? Well, if the increase goes up 10%, so maybe it's about another $40,000 next year, the number is 300. And then we go and we talk about how effective that was, and if there's additional things that they want to do or whatever, but our baseline there is going to be the 300. And so instead of having 85,000, then there's 120,000. And unless they can make a justification on why they need it, then that would go into a reserve.
No, I'm in full agreement with that.
Okay,
I
yeah.
was not hearing that baseline
Yeah.
out of a cap that we negotiate
Right.
each year.
Right, and I don't have, in my mind, there's no automatic adjustments on that. Now, I think that we should, again, we want them to be wildly successful, so we should be, pretty reasonable, or maybe a little bit more than reasonable, on taking some risks on making sure that they're successful. But you get to make that choice every year, and they have to justify it every year. So that there's a check and balance.
My point is that not all of it
No,
automatically goes to the chamber.
No.
That's what I was hearing.
right, no, I guess, in some ways it does. What we're saying is, okay, the 85 goes to you, the 385, but we're taking back 80. I think the way that it would actually work mechanically is we would assign them 300. That 85 would never go to them, it would just go into the visitor center. Now, if we give it to, if they're going to manage the visitor center in all likelihood, then those funds would go for the visitor center, but that would be half of our source of the funds. Where before we paid 160, now our cost would be 74 to 80, or whatever the cost is that they would go. So they're actually cutting back, and we're taking care, and this year we have to take care of the visitor center. And short of this thing that was talked about up here, this is probably the best way to go with it. We have other options if we go the other way. But for right now, I think that hedges our bets on them being successful. It accomplishes what the board is saying. They can get it all, just automatically. We're establishing the baseline. And with the idea that we would be working towards a reserve, because again, suppose they get another $100,000, another $100,000 in that fund, then we only need to put in a certain amount, then that would go into the reserve to be controlled by the council. Okay.
And I got a feeling, we can only do so much with this year's budget.
Yeah.
So some of the decisions you're talking about, Mike, are really down the road.
Right.
But I agree with those. So, we have proposed at this point, unless somebody is opposed to what Bruce has proposed, and I'm going to repeat it one more time, is that of the 384, 300 goes into the tourism promotion, 84 goes to the Chamber Visitor Center out of the transient room tax fund on page 56. The remaining 76 to fund the visitor center that come out of the general fund.
Yes.
And when we are making the assumption that that money will come in.
Yeah, well, we haven't discussed all the other
Right.
things that we're.
No, but I'm talking about, those numbers are based on a projection. So
we'll
are
have to
they going
do that
to,
later.
are they going to be fixed numbers? Or are they going to be somehow tied to a percentage of what actually does come in?
These are
Well,
fixed
because
numbers.
they're budgeted, they have to match the revenue and the expenditure, so.
That's a good question. I think that because we pay them quarterly, and if the amount we're taking out, let's make it easier for my math to say that it's 80, then when we do the payment, we should probably take 20 out each quarter to make sure that the visitor center is funded, and then they get what the balance is.
Well, that's,
If it's less.
that's,
No, I'm sorry, up to the 300. Up to the 300.
And anything above that would end up going into this reserve fund that you're talking about.
Would go into the reserve or whatever, but what I'm saying is that I think that because of the nature of the visitor center, that if we're saying you're going to pay half and it's going to be around 80,000, then we should go ahead and take that each quarter to make sure that it's there. So that's the first money out is towards the visitor center.
And aren't these numbers maximums? And if we don't, for some reason, something happens and people don't come to the beach, then they
Right,
just
there's
don't
no
get it.
guarantee.
So this is just maximum. We don't have minimum, it's maximum.
The
You would
only
just
funds that
say-
we're talking about are what's generated, and if it's less than that, you're right. I mean, we're not going to take money from the general fund to make up the difference.
No.
So as I understand it, the full cost of the visitor center, we're still paying for, right, this year, and next year,
Well,
and
we-
we'll start
We'll
to
talk.
do that.
We're taking
Yes.
out of the general fund 76,000.
Right, next.
Nancy, you're right, in that we're paying it, and actually, all the money that comes in, we're paying. But the difference this year is that, or last year, there was 160,000 came out of the general fund. This year, we're anticipating at least 80,000 is going to come out of the TRT, and only 80,000 will come out of the general fund. We're writing, I guess, essentially, we're writing the checks, maybe not, but it's less of an impact on the city than what it has.
And so next year, do we anticipate that we will be responsible for less, for instance, if we took it out of the general fund, we're going to be responsible for less money from the general fund?
I would think so. They told us that they could take less over a 3-year period.
But also, they said they want to start at 40, and we're starting with 80. So I don't know if you want to set that now. or
I don't
if you
think
want to-
we can as a budget committee. but-
So I think then I think that we will look at that next year and what the intent is.
You know, I would hope that the intent would be that our contribution would be less
The
than
the general fund would give zero eventually.
And it should be possible if the revenues continue to
Yeah.
increase.
Yeah, because then that total, that 384 is going to be more, you still have the 300,000 for the promotion, and then you have a bigger chunk that's available for the visitor center from the TRT fund.
So we have,
Anybody want to repeat it?
so we have the next item on the agenda is break for dinner, but I think we might want to start a general discussion on the budget. Do you guys want to eat early and then go into the detail of what we agree or don't agree on what's in the budget?
Well, that won't be here till 7, don't you have a transient room tax?
Yeah, but so the food's not here.
No, not till 7.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so
No.
the transient room tax, I think we've
Yeah, we
covered
can
transient
defer
room tax.
dinner.
We've discussed that. So we're at the discussion regarding the City of Canterbury's proposed budget. And I don't know about you, but I have, and I don't think I should go first, but I have a number of points that I have questions about the proposed budget.
What page?
Pardon me?
I'm sorry, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, I think we should go around the table here and
Agenda item for the transient room tax fund, wasn't that Bruce's proposal? Is that?
That's a way to deal with it, but I think,
no, that's what we've already got. You're talking about the new 1%?
Yeah.
no,
It's
I
nowhere
don't
near
think-
it's nowhere near on the agenda.
no.
I don't think as the budget committee, I think that's a city council decision that's got to be made with some, after some thought and gnashing of teeth.
So we're not going to gnash our teeth tonight.
I don't think I don't know that we can budget something that's not
Because it's not an approved.
not an approved program. So I don't think we can, I think we've covered what we need to cover based on what we just talked about with transient room tax. That make sense? Okay, so, I'm assuming that besides me, everybody else has some comments about the budget and what they.
Why don't you start for us, Richard?
Pardon me?
Why don't you go ahead and start?
Take the best
Well,
notes.
Okay. I have to, and Bruce, you've only been here 5 or 6 months, so don't take this personally, okay? I think Bruce has some great ideas. I think he's trying to do too much too fast with too much money. That's my bottom line. I just think that there's a lot of things in the budget this year that are, they're good. None of them are bad, but I think there's too much. And I think, as an example, we're talking about a code enforcement officer. When I look I listen to what Mark talks about, building permits are down. We also have a note in here that our building official is we're gonna cut our contract with Manzanita. So why can't we use the building official to be our code enforcement officer for the first year? And really know if we have a problem. As an example, I mean, we got a real soft answer when we really have a problem. We're talking about buying the software. I think that's a good idea to buy the software and figure out if we have an issue. But we really don't know if we have a problem with code enforcement, especially with the transient room tax. And I look at, staffing increases. I mean, I have a list here that is exhaustive, but I just think overall that we're trying to go too far, too fast, with too much money. And this is a very aggressive budget compared to what I've seen over the last 7 years in government.
Well, I'm closest, I think, to the Public Works side of things, since I'm on the Public Works Committee. And, I know we had committed with the master plan to having some capital projects being done, which I think is great that we're doing that. But what I also noticed is that there's quite a large increase in the material and services and the, just the regular operations of Public Works. And again, I think it's, we might be trying to do too much too quickly on this. Because, I mean, we're seeing almost $500,000 change, not with respect to capital projects, just with respect to the day-to-day operations of Public Works over, roads, water, wastewater, and storm. And that just seems like a big change in that arena. That was the thing that jumped out most at me.
What in particular, what item in particular jumped out at you, or is there?
Well, there wasn't an item in particular, but it was kind of like excavation services, we're adding another $30,000 to that, and then, contract services adding another $30,000 in water, in wastewater, in like all the components, and, any one in particular didn't really jump out at me, but when I, looked at them all as a whole, it was surprising that it was really that much of a cumulative change.
Can I just ask the council, do you wish for us to respond on an individual basis or wait till the end? My preference is that we deal with these as a comment is made, that we're able to respond, so we don't get too far behind on them.
Okay. I would prefer that everybody get a chance to talk because it could get dragged on too long. So if you could just take notes, that'd be my preference, and then come back and answer a particular question. But
yeah, I think if we have individual, here's what I'd like to do is we have individual issues. I have a whole bunch, but if we have individual issues, we should talk about them now, and then we should just flip through the pages of the budget where there are issues. And there's a lot of pages I don't have issues with, but other pages people have issues, we have questions. It may not, go one way or another, but we have questions about what's going on. And
My preference is that we answer those if they're asked, as opposed to doing a long list after.
Okay.
It's up to the council.
Oh, I guess you can talk about your general overview concerns, like you started. But if we go through basically page by page and let staff respond.
yeah, I think that's the way, because we'll come to the code enforcement and we'll come to the others. But but does anybody else have just general concerns about the budget, or you're supportive of what Bruce has proposed? I think we just ought to kind of have a general, if you feel like commenting, comment. Then we should go through the individual items.
Well, I'm kind of, I share Bruce's concern about reserve not having, I call them operators, but I think that there needs to be liquidity, I guess you want to call it, in case of an emergency. You don't want to be in a situation where, you've got no way to respond, and that's something I'm
I definitely facing problems with our increasing visitors. So I think you definitely need a code enforcement officer. I'm a little concerned about the emergency manager. I think we definitely need one, but I think I'm still wondering if we could go part-time on that person, at least for the first year, and then build a budget up for a full-time person maybe on the beginning of the second year. So I definitely support a code enforcement officer.
The question I have on the emergency manager, can you really find somebody with the skill that will work just part-time? They're not going to be looking for a full-time job, so that's always an issue when you talk part-time. Sympathize with Richard's comment about the code enforcement, and yet that's what people complain to me about is more than anything else, the traffic, okay, but what's going on in the neighborhood? You know, how come they're allowed to build that? Why can they do this? Nobody's making a move. There's RVs on the road, you know, parked in front for 3 weeks. There's people living in it, you know. Who do you tell? I mean, so I get a lot of that kind of stuff. And, you know, I'll call Jason or Mark or somebody that maybe, or even Public Works. I don't ever say, will you take care of it? You say, it's been reported. Looking somehow it gets taken care of. I think if we do get the software that's going to scan all the rental, it will tell us a lot about how much we need a code enforcement, but only when it comes to enforcing the ordinances. But I think that's a big one, and I think that there will be a lot of revenues collected that we're not currently getting. I can find 5 right now. They're all relatives. Yeah, we have lots of friends from all over the world. But we have put it off over and over and over. And I think we need a code enforcement officer. I think we need the emergency prep. Emergency prep, you know, it's one of those you hope you never need it. Why are we paying for somebody to do all this planning and hope we never need it? But we've gone to a certain point with emergency preparedness, and we've done it with all the staff, and a little bit here and a little bit there, part-time, and a consultant that comes in periodically and got us to this point. But now we need somebody on the ground pulling all of this together, or just forget about it. So, those are big expenses, and those are the 2 biggest items that jump out to me, because personnel are expensive. If we could get a robot to do it, that'd be great, but we can't. So, anyway, that's my offset. I understand that, but I'm one that thinks we really do need those. How accurate these salary estimates are for these positions. They can be work. If we get somebody that would like to do it part-time, that'd be great. If they would do it 4 days a week or 3 days a week, or shorter hours, some way to reduce that. And when we go out to recruit those positions, I think we should make that part of the solicitation, that we consider full-time, but we, full-time, we consider part-time. Might draw on more. That's the response to that comment.
I don't have any specific, other than the fact that there's no resource for possibly working into the old school building. I think that's a disappointment. I'm sorry, I don't have much of a throat right now, so having an ability to jump on the old school building if we could, and the offer was sudden or something like that. I feel like that was in the budget in the past, and it was nice to have that possibility. My concerns run more into process. this budget process and the budget committee works well. I don't think personally that the council has taken into account the priorities as good as we should. I keep trying to push this, that I think we should have a really clear priority plan ahead of the budget process so that it's more defined. What we have here is good. It's kind of general in its terminology. I feel that the city has healthy discretionary funds that we can be using for things. Our problem is that we have, over long periods of time, earmarked them for little things here and there. That we've kind of said, okay, now we're committed to that. They are worthy. I am not saying that they're not. I do think that we need to look at that whole list every so often and compare it to new and fresh ideas. This is a council thing, so I'm not trying to say these are changes I want to make in this budget. I think the budget could be tweaked on little points, but I'm okay with it so far.
Sam, I just have a quick question. When Bruce prepares the budget, are you guys involved at all in his budget preparation? Are you aware of?
Not in the budget preparation. We are ahead of time in the fact that we have a goal setting and the strategic plan, and we guide what we think are our priorities. The budget process is a staff-driven thing, and that then comes to us. So it's as new to us as it is to you.
If I can address that, we actually tried to wiggle around Oregon law by having that preliminary meeting where we didn't talk about things, but we are precluded from having a conversation that is specific. Now, in the interpretation that I understood was that that has to do with the budget committee, but because the majority of the budget committee is the council, we couldn't even have the conversations with the council. So I was going from the what has been past practice, what has been discussed in meetings, what was talked about at the goals and objectives, and that's what is the basis for the budget you're looking at. But again, we kind of went around the rules, even doing something early.
I think, under my understanding of public works, certainly not public works, but public meetings, as long as you don't have a quorum, as long as you have 5 people in the city council, that's not a quorum, and so you could discuss.
No, you can't. You can't.
In budget
because you
law,
have a quorum
you can't.
on top. You can have 2 people that they can discuss, but.
As long as you don't have a quorum, my understanding is you can't.
No, not at all.
Okay, so then
No, the number is 2 people. You can have 2 people, like one counselor talks to another counselor, that's allowed, but they can't go back and forth and say, well, Joe said this, and kind of working down, it's a conversation between them. But if we, I guess the numbers do work out. If you don't have a quorum of the council, it's 2 people, so that works mathematically. But as far as the quorum here, I mean, because they're on this committee, and you can't have conversations until you have a budget to present, that's kind of a backwards way for me to do it, but that is how it works. And again, we're fiddling with the law anyway, so.
There'd be one thing, I think I've asked this before, I think I asked Tammy, I can't remember. If late in the year, November, December, something like that, the budget committee was to get together again and discuss how they felt the budget worked, not about the future budget, but how the budget worked, might be a way to prepare for the next year. But you're not talking about any numbers specific to the coming year. You're only talking about how you felt like the process worked. That might be a helpful.
I think that'd be a really good idea.
There's usually budget, the state puts on budget conferences or classes. And there's usually one either in Astoria or Tillamook or someplace that's close to us that I know Colleen has sent out emails saying that, it's available and stuff. And before the budget season starts, because obviously there's always new people on budget committees and stuff.
But those really address the state law, budget practices, how you go about it, what you can and can't do.
Right.
and That sort of thing. But I think what I heard here was mid-year. just
Oh, a little
have this-
closer
have
to
this-
home and
This
health.
committee
Okay.
reconvene, so sort of a checkpoint, how's the budget going? You're not
Okay.
making decisions then, but there'll be a sense as to what's working, what isn't working, as you then prepare for next year.
I think Lori sending out the quarterly financials is, to me, really helpful. Kind of see what's going on, and you'll see if a fund is growing or not growing.
But it would be good, like after getting the first quarter one, that would kind of align with the November timeframe to, meet at that point, and have that as, something to reflect on.
This is probably my seventh budget. I was on the council 15 years ago for a couple of years and went through a couple of budgets. And now this is my fifth one this go-round. I felt that, that I wish the process were different. I find the budgeting process and the way it works, correct me if I'm wrong, but our city manager takes time and spends it, which comes to all the council meetings, obviously. It comes to all the goal setting, so he's quite aware of what we're thinking. He sits down with us individually. He sits down with all his department heads individually and comes up, and it becomes the city manager's budget. It becomes a staff budget, I think. And then we, as the council and as the budget committee, end up, either approving it or not approving it, and we tend to approve it. 5 years ago, when my first budget here, I remember the talk about how, we were in such great shape. We got a lot of money. We're so lucky. We got all this money coming in. We got all these reserves. Well, it's pretty much gone. Since then, we realized, gee, we haven't been putting enough money back for all the things that came up. The RV park required a lot of money. Our water services required a lot of money, and now it's depleted. This is probably, I agree with Richard, this is probably the most aggressive budget that I've seen. The least amount of contingency and reserves that we've had in the past. And I think it's a time when we need more than ever, not less, in terms of contingency and reserves. So I guess, and I don't like to go into budget and pick it apart and say this item and this item, I think this is different. I think the staff knows best, where, if any cuts should be made in the budget, the staff knows where those should be made, not me as a counselor. I might have ideas and suggestions, but I guess I would like to see would be for staff to go back and see, sharpen the pencil, see where can we, cut some things out that aren't really necessary right now, and therefore give us more contingency, more reserve, and begin to build our reserves to be able to do things that we keep talking about and now we don't do anything. Affordable housing, this building, the school property, South Wind. These are all things that we don't have money for, but we keep talking about them. So that's my 2 cents.
George, if I can address, because you made an interesting point about it being the manager's budget. In my practice, or my intent, is that the first budget that's presented is the manager's budget. And then after that, it is the council's budget, because it's yours to go ahead and modify. And at the end, it's your policy document. Because really, I have no control what you do. Once we go ahead and give this to you, it's all your decision. So that's where it comes in, that, it goes into your control. And, we can go back and look and as you say, sharpen the pencil or whatever. But in a lot of cases, we're making policy decisions. For example, if we were to cut the code enforcement officer, we feel that code enforcement is important, is what we've heard. But what we're saying is that we won't be that good in code enforcement. And it goes to saves $100,000, but it took away the opportunity for you to decide if we want to be in, what level do we want to be in the code enforcement business? How ready do we want to be from emergency management? How active do we want to be on the beach with HRAP or whatever it is? These are all decisions, and this is your biggest statement, your biggest policy decision. And so it's the staff's, until we gave it to you 2 weeks ago. Now it's yours, and when it's adopted, it is a council budget that we will implement.
And where that breaks down, in my opinion, is that it becomes staff puts a lot of time and effort into coming up with this budget. And of course, they're going to defend it because they put all their time and energy into it. And I think as a budget committee, as a council, we are not inclined to go against that. You know, we tend to roll with it. And I think that's the inclination of the system. The way the system works is, it is the staff's budget because that's their responsibility. And there isn't that often that we change anything in that budget. You know, maybe this time we will do more because there seems to be more of a general consensus that maybe we are being too aggressive with the budget. But I think that's what I see happening. One last thing on I too think that the code enforcement officer is probably a valuable thing. But again, I guess we could vote on that, you know, if we wanted, as a budget committee, if we want that to stay in and want to look for other things to cut. But I don't have a good sense of that myself, but in talking to the people that I feel do have a good sense of that, you know, I'm encouraged that is an important position to fill.
Kind of supporting what George has said, is we're not the experts, we're not directing staff, we rely on the staff. Fortunately, we have an outstanding staff in all positions, and this budget reflects, and we can just trust them to have done the best job they can, that this is what they really need to achieve the direction that they've gotten either indirectly from us or from their city manager. But I like the comment somebody made that, stick to this budget, each department should be encouraged to be as efficient and frugal as they can and still provide good service, such that if there's anything left over, we begin to build the reserves that we've over years lost, not just spend it.
I think my concern, I would agree with that, Mike, but my concern is, Bruce is new, he's been here about 5 months, and I don't think there's anything wrong with every one of your proposals makes sense. I mean, I can't argue with any of them, really, other than the fiscal side of it. But we have a new public works director who's been here less than a year. She came on as I think as an assistant, and then now as the public works director. We're going to be having a new planning director. Mark is going to go off to greener pastures. And so, you have staff, we have staff under pretty major departments that are relatively new. And I'm just concerned that we're trying to do maybe too much this first year with you. But that's just my personal opinion. I'm one of 10, so. Brandon, we're going around just talking about kind of our general consensus of the budget. We're going to then have break for dinner and come back and go over the detail and approve or discuss if we've got any major changes.
Thank you, Richard.
So it's up to you if you want to say anything or if you want to just pass.
I'll pass it.
Okay.
Thank you.
It was your turn, I just,
Okay.
you just sat down and told me.
You sat down at your turn.
George has spoken.
You sat at the wrong chair. Well, thanks for appointing me to this committee. Really enjoyed every minute of it.
I'll see you next year.
I might convince you around next year. But I agree with Mayor Sam's comment about bullet points in the message that one of the words that is in that is safe. You know, you want to provide a safe community. And some of the proposals relate to that and some of them don't. But the one that stands out to me is police cars. You want to have a safe community. You want to protect your tourists. It's tourist related, or it's public safety related. But you can't really enforce your laws and ordinances without cars. And for all the things that we've been discussing, it bothers me that the chief is juggling cars and trying to figure out how many tires he's got for how many cars, and I think sooner or later that comes back to bite you. So I don't want you to sell short your mission on public safety. And then the other one I wanted to comment that's sort of related to the same thing is the emergency manager, because I've been in a couple of declared emergencies, and in the ones without a plan, the incident commander is running around scrambling, trying to pull together what plans there are, trying to get one from ODOT or the Forest Service or Department of Ag, and everybody's got a different plan. And you put them all in a big pile. Meanwhile, the emergency's going on all around you. And you're saying, well, what are we going to do to make a plan now? And you don't have time to read through the pile of plans. So I think I applaud the idea of having an emergency manager just to begin that process of merging all the regional plans. And then, like Mike said, maybe you'll never have to use it, but it's a lot more fun to never have to use it than have to use one that you don't have. So that's my comment.
Well, I agree with Richard that it's a pretty aggressive budget. Just looking through the budget message, we've got 4 things, new things proposed, brought up, and they are over $725,000 for the 4 of them. And those are new things. So there's, we're no reserves. Now, they're good things, don't get me wrong. It's the code enforcement, it's the emergency manager, the $100,000 for the data stuff, and then $425,000 for a loan, which I don't like the idea of city getting a loan when we've got the amount of money that we have. I don't think we should go out and rent money. I think we need the code enforcement officer. I think that I like Nancy's idea of the emergency person have time to start off with and then see, what. But, we just have to make the choices. I mean, actually, council, we suggest, and then council chooses, but, it's things that are wanted, things that are needed. Do we want all these new people and things, or do we think that we should put some reserves away and some contingency? I like to have the contingency. I was here when the water system went south, and we're like $1 million short. It was, what was it? It was the wastewater? No. Yeah, the treatment center, the treatment things over there. Anyway, we didn't have enough money, and so then after that, then we were putting $200,000 a year in wastewater and $50,000 in water to build up the reserves so that if something happened, we would have something. And then along the way, that got decided that it didn't need to be done anymore, and now we're back to no reserves again. So, I like reserves.
Okay. Any other comments before we go on a break for, we'll reconvene at 7:30? Is that agreeable to everybody?
And then will I have a chance to respond at that time?
Pardon me?
Can I respond at that time?
Do you want to respond now? Or?
No.
Okay, no, you can, that'd be fine.
Okay, thank you. And when I got here, we're even more remote than anything that I've dealt with. And we really don't have anybody that's going to go ahead and do that. We've got contractors that are local that probably could help us, but we have to have somebody that's going to go ahead and follow up and do the contracts and all that sort of thing, check with FEMA to make sure our contracts are going to be reimbursable. There's all kinds of steps that need to come into that. The only pre-positioned contract we have is one that was recently approved by County and has to do with Mass Care. but we haven't really had a conversation with them, to my knowledge, between CERT, which is a very good program, and then the Cannon Beach Medical Program, as far as how we fit into that, because we've not had the time to go ahead and have that kind of a discussion and figure out all those kind of things, and work out the logistics. We know that the supplies for the beach communities are going to come into Bend. I don't know who's bringing them in. I don't know who to call to say what we need, those kind of things. So there's some big gaps, and they've not been addressed. We've done it in a different model where we've kind of taken care of things that are on a FEMA list, but the overall plan has not been addressed. How ready do we want to be? If we don't do it and nothing happens, we made a good business decision. But, how ready do we want to be? The records, it's a lot of money. To me, at some point, you're going to have to spend it. And I would rather spend it while we still have records to save, because we are a roof leak away from losing records about some of the past, the developments that have been put in, all kinds of things, all the records that we have an obligation to hold, like especially on the development stuff, like forever. And as long as it doesn't leak and the roof doesn't fall in and all that, and somebody can find them, because we're going to be on our third or fourth planning director, whoever put those things up there, we'll be okay. But from a policy standpoint, I'm thinking that's not necessarily a good idea, so I'm putting it out to you. From the policy decision, do we want to have those records in a way that they're easily accessible? And then that leads to the next thing, which I couldn't get Richard to believe me when I was telling him what our status is on the servers. We have servers set up back here, and they're relatively new, okay? The servers partially back up to another server in the same room. Some stuff goes off-site, and I think it might be the police stuff, right? But we are a roof leak away in a building that's never had a roof replaced. And we just had some leaks right over here by the electrical system about 2-3 weeks ago. But there is no backup, other than that. And so if you have a backup and you have an internet connection, you can set up just about any place. But if those things are, water and whoever knows what else, and dust and everything else goes in, if we have a leak, then we really don't have a lot. And oh, by the way, we can't recreate it because the paper records are also, are all soggy and everything up there. So we can live with that as long as the roof doesn't leak. But the policy decision is how much of a risk are we willing to take on the records that we're required to keep? And how much of a risk are we willing to take on all the information that we're storing every day and we're creating every day that we can't, if something was to happen, well, there's nobody we can call. Richard mentioned we'll call your vendor. Well, if we sent our stuff to a vendor, we could call them, but we don't do that yet. So that's why I'm bringing this kind of thing forward. So you talked about emergency management. George talks about, and some of the other did, with the frustration of not being able to do certain things. Sam talked about the funding for the Cannon Beach Elementary. Made a proposal, really very aggressive. It's kind of nuts. I said, you're really going to present this, but it does those kind of things, and you don't have to accept it. But it's a policy thing that would have provided some money. There's other ways to do it. We can make a bunch of other cuts, to other functions that we're doing to say, okay, we'll have some money ready for Cannon Beach Elementary or whatever. But right now, with the budget as I see it, with the things that we're trying to go ahead and accomplish, the additional things, I don't know how else to do it other than we take that action. And again, that's a policy decision as to whether or not we're going to do that. Now, I'd like, there was some discussion about the increases in the operating costs, from Public Works. I'd like Karen, who's been doing an incredible job taking care of things, I'd like you to come up and go ahead and talk about why those increases are there.
I'll admit that being at this podium is not one of my #1 favorite things, but I can hardly hold myself down in the back as I was hearing you guys talk about budget. First of all, I agree with Councilman Benefield's comments relative to budget efficiency.
And I agree with Richard in that I've only been here 7 months, but I brought to the table over 30 years' experience with Verizon Communications as an engineering director. And I know what the health of the network looks like, I know what infrastructure reliability looks like, and I know what it takes to not only create that, but maintain that. And so telephone and utility may be different from the city infrastructure, but in a lot of aspects, it's the same. And managing the budget that goes along with that is no different than my house, my personal health, or anything else that I consider an asset that's a crucial part of anybody's livelihood or their day-to-day existence. That's the way we should look at our infrastructure. To me, the infrastructure here is our biggest asset. And without the water rate increases, we, in a lot of aspects, have done just the minimum to take care of things here in the city. And I could name off several things on 2 hands here that would probably curl your hair that we have MacGyvered, jerry-rigged, and strung along to keep it working in our network that needs to be addressed. So if the Public Works goals for this coming year looks aggressive, it's because they need to be. None of these projects are fluff. And I'm chasing grant money because there's many more that need to be addressed. And I'm not waiting for you to solve that for me. I'm going to find funding anywhere that I can find it to make that happen for this city. That's the asset I bring to this table. And I feel absolutely confident that I can do that. I don't need to go back over the master plan and rethink that. Sorry, this is my passion coming out. I don't need to go through that master plan and rethink it. The projects that I feel could be reconsidered have been pulled off the table already. And so I would just ask you to not pull anything away from what I've asked in the budget for this year's funding. I think it's crucial to what we need to have to support our health of our network, the redundancy of our network. The Sunset Pump Station, we laughed about that tongue-in-cheek about it failing. It's not a joke. Can I address that with the lower amount of money? You bet I can. Could I do it better with the greater amount of money? Sure I could. But there's land acquisition that comes along with that, and history that I was unaware of as far as Dan, but I'm clear on that now. But it can be done with a lower amount of money, and I think it should be. Same with our S-curves. We need the redundancy in that. That's a no-brainer. I could just go on and on. Our Ash Street water line. Could I delay that and have this blacktop blow up again up by Les's house? Sure, I could do that. I can delay and wait on anything you want me to, but does it make sense? Absolutely not. So I would just say, really seriously look at Public Works before you start cutting. Your infrastructure is your biggest asset. I can delay on my new truck. I will delay in a lot of other aspects, but please don't do it with our wastewater, water, storm drains. I need the excavation because I need the Vector trucks. We just had sewer out on Spruce last night, guys working till 8 o'clock at night. Can I ignore that and wait? Sure. Is it the right thing to do? No.
Thank you, Karen.
It's hard for you, when you get a call like what happened last night on Spruce, to not be able to call, a contractor, because we don't have a Vector truck. And so we call somebody in, and then we go in and we do the work when they can go ahead and clear the hole to a degree. So, to me, as a matter of fact, we celebrated Public Works Day today. And it was really a fun thing. But Public Works thrives on being invisible. Because if you know Public Works is there, it's going to be messed up. And those are the kind of things we got in the old system, and we've not been able to go ahead and reinvest and fix, actually replace things that probably should be replaced. And so we're in repairing mode. And so it's how quickly you want us to be able to respond, and how well we're going to be able to respond, those kinds of things. And you got a crew that is amazing. Like I said the other night, I was coming to go ahead and ask for permission to fix a major leak that we had, but I had to ask for forgiveness for having it done already and just asking for the money, because they will stay on top of it. Now, Jason, if you can talk about from the code enforcement side, some of the things that, you folks like to start and have to stop, and those kind of things, and also your assessment from an emergency management standpoint, where if something was to happen, how good a shape are we in?
That's a loaded question. We're set. So, starting with code enforcement, so many issues from the day I started. Unfortunately, like I said, it was probably 5 years before I came here. They had, the code enforcement position had become a patrol position. And so they didn't have a separate code enforcement position. And we've had issues since the day I started, whether it be anything that's listed in our ordinances. At some point, I hope you guys would look and see all the ordinances to know how many there are, but there are so many, and it goes from overgrown trees to berry bushes around houses being a certain height, grass. We get calls throughout the summer of those things that we need to go and address, and it's never a preventative type thing where we can go out and keep all of those maintained. It's more of a responsive, responding to those calls when we have the time to deal with it. Because our main purpose is public safety, making sure that people are safe, that traffic's flowing through town, and that there's no crime going on. So this is a last second opportunity of us trying to get out and address those things. There's several dilapidated houses that we're constantly dealing with. I'm getting calls from citizens weekly on houses that aren't getting upkept and need to be, whether it's a new roof or they have scaffolding around their house, anything along those lines, we get called on for certain houses, as well as sign issues throughout town that can be blocking views from people when they're pulling out on streets, including bushes, shrubbery, that just limits your visibility. But especially from the fire department aspect, I know I get comments from firefighters as often as I see them on areas that need to be trimmed back, whether it's property owners or on the city right away, but also signs there on the right of way. Abandoned vehicles I discussed already, as well as abandoned property. And all of that's about keeping our village clean and kept up. And part of that is also us making sure that everybody has to live by the same rules and keep up on their own property. But those are things that we don't have time to enforce on a regular basis. On top of that is the vacation room rental, vacation homes, and dealing with those issues. I've talked about those as well. It's a science to do what Alicia does with the vacation home rental. I used to do that as the chief and just could not find time to do it in the last couple of years. But it was a springtime job, and actually they do it quarterly now. I used to only have time to do it once a year, and I would do it on my flight back from vacation every year because I would have uninterrupted 5 hours to do it on the plane because that's just what it needed. And then that would, after doing it, you have to go send the letters out, then you have to go and talk to the people and address any violations and go forward with citations. So that's time consuming, but that has nothing to do with this new program that we're looking at getting, which will bring in so many different violations that we're unaware of. These are just people that are calling these violations in, whether it's a neighbor saying, hey, this person's running out every weekend, I don't think that's right. And that's just the people that call in. We have so many neighborhoods where they're second homeowners, and there's not people watching these houses that are running throughout the year and make it unfair to all these other business owners who are renting out properly and going the right route. So as I had said earlier, in Seaside, they have that same program, and it takes one full-time person just working on that alone to find them. Of course, Seaside's bigger, but we have a lot of vacation room rental violations in town that need to be addressed. Regarding emergency management, I think our biggest asset in Cannon Beach is our citizenry and our CERT program, our MRC, our volunteers, but they need people to manage them. I am more than happy to manage them, but I also have other jobs to do. And so having, Stacy's been great, she's been a great helper. Having it as a full-time position, I think that we could grow. Something that we did 2 years ago with the strategic planning was said that we were going to have 200 CERT members, I think by this year. And we would by now if I had the time to dedicate to it. I'm happy enough that we have 53, but I know we could have 200 because we have so many citizens that are willing to help. And I think it's a great asset because we do constantly talk about how a lot of the city employees don't live in town. Well, the CERT members do, and the MRC members do, and those are going to be the people that come out and are able to help in an emergency, in a disaster. Somebody that's here to run and set that up, the training, quarterly training, just for department heads, but also for employees, ways to evacuate. We're lucky to do that once a year because it takes time to set all that and coordinate it with different department heads. That's something that Stacy has been great at, but she can't do it as often as we'd like because she's in Eugene and she's only here a certain amount of days a month. Getting the emergency cash sites set up, and it's an ongoing process of updating the food and rotating the food out and getting new food and supplies up there that isn't being done on a regular basis, as well as keeping track of all the supplies there and getting new supplies that we need. I don't think that we've spent any time in the last 2 or 3 years updating what's in the cache sites, and so they become where they're not useful to us, the supplies that we have up there. I think if we had a storm, like the 2007 Gale, I think that we'd be a lot closer to where we need to be. I think that we've learned a lot from that situation, working with Red Cross, trying to build that relationship up. But this person that we would bring on as emergency manager would be that coordinator to coordinate all those relationships and keep those going, as well as the training for the citizens. If we had a tsunami, I think a lot of the connections that Bruce is trying to make with us, with other agencies, whether it be the Coast Guard or other contractors that can bring in supplies, is what's going to be important. I think we've based a lot of what we've done on preparing for it, and even that's faltered just because we don't have the time to continue to work on it. But now we need to start working on recovery, what happens after, and building all those supplies and how we're going to build the citizens up and get them back to where we need to be. But certainly could use a lot of work, and having somebody full-time to do that, as well as train the citizens and the businesses to get them all on the same page, is certainly necessary.
607 in the area.
Thanks, you guys.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
I've been on the ground after the storms. It's good to have somebody to deal with the hurt and that kind of thing, but people want to get back in their homes. And if you can't clear a road, you can't start fixing the water system and the power system, you don't get involved with turning on a water system before the sewer system was running, and we created a whole other situation for ourselves to deal with. But we don't have any of that. And it's not going to be something that we can do ourselves. You have to have somebody come in that's just got the skills, that's outside, wasn't affected, wasn't impacted, and then we're talking about weeks before we're really making any kind of a progress to say, yes, you can go back to your home. So, to me, there's just a very serious gap.
Okay. Anything else, Bruce, on your side?
No, other than, again, the things that are put out there, I think are just, they're the things that I need to bring to your attention and say that we need to decide, is this something to fix or something we don't fix, and that's a policy decision. And I think that is probably the most important function of, what you're doing. If there's a number, if somebody wants to go back and take another look at numbers or something, and you want to set a goal, we can do that. But to me, we did go through that. We did spend a whole bunch of time with Karen before we said, all right, we'll put this budget out that's higher than what it's been. But it looked like that's what we needed to do based on our situation on the ground now, as opposed to say, well, it's more than last time, so we'll just live with what we did last time. we're trying to be better than what we were in the past.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right. What I'd like to do now at this point is to go through the budget, and
I'm sorry, Richard, I didn't catch the last part.
I'd just like to go through the individual pages of the
Yeah.
budget. And I don't think we have, because I think we start at page 31, because before that, it's all revenue. I don't think we have any adjustments to revenue, am I correct?
We're talking about changing the general fund, or repurposing the general fund numbers to be a true general fund, $200,000 from the RV park. And then if there's any consideration, well,
Lori said that we would pick that up in the RV
Okay.
park.
but he says there are already changes. Now,
Yeah.
those are things that they'll have to.
Right. Okay. But the other thing that you had proposed was a 1% increase in the transfer tax. And that, to me, is not something that's going to be part of the budget. It's going to be something the city council decides, and if it goes forward, it would be in next year's budget.
Right. I agree. I think that should be on the table here, because we don't have that money.
Okay.
Richard, before we get started there,
Yes.
I'm uncomfortable going line by line, I guess,
Well,
because,
I'm talking about just flipping through pages. If somebody has something they want to discuss by page, then, most of these pages, I think we can just kind of flip through. We can go from 31 to 32 or whatever.
because my main concern is the contingencies and the lack of them. And therefore, I wouldn't want to decide what line items to cut or what I liked or didn't like. I feel that the staff is in a much better position to decide if there's going to be cuts, where they should be made. I think that I just don't feel qualified to say, well, gee, don't spend this, but spend that. They have that information. They're much closer to what the knowledge on that than I am.
All right. So if we go to page, I think it's page 32, and we talked about page 32, about the sea turtles forever, which is a small line item, but it was, I think, a consensus that we talked about that it would really belong under the community service grants. So do we want to leave a separate line item for sea turtles forever, or do we want them to apply to under the community service grants?
I'm afraid you make it a line item, it's just going to be there forever.
Yeah, my concern equally is that we're setting a precedent that the same argument could be for so many items that we're giving on the community services grants.
So we agree we should move that into the community service grants?
I have a different opinion and would just like to voice it.
Okay.
I assume that the Sea Turtles Forever grant is for the beach cleanup.
Yes.
And I'm also feeling that at this point, if they haven't made a proposal to the Tourism and Arts Fund, they won't get the money.
Community grants.
The community grants. And so I would vote to leave it in there at this point.
Could we not designate to the Community Grants Committee that we want that money, in spite of the lack of application? Can we override that rule?
No, that's not our job. That's their job.
But they have the ability through their rules to have a second round, to review.
Well, how about if we increased it to 82,000?
To what?
Take the line out, take the line, sea turtle line out, and put community grants up to,
Well, they have a pretty strong stance in that anything that is late past their application date, that they don't accept those applications, and they had another organization who submitted late, just 2 hours late, and, oh, sorry, 2 of them, and, they were not able to consider those, so you kind of.
see, I think that it's an administrative, to me, I don't have any argument with the cleanup. I have an argument with the process. I don't think it should be in the budget as a line item, and I think if they miss the deadline, that's really their responsibility. If they were serious about the program.
Well,
they would
sure,
have done
and
it.
that's very possible, but it's also possible that somebody had offered to give them this money.
I did that.
And
When they asked me, I said I would put a line item in. So I don't know when that happened relative to the time that it went to the committee. I don't know if that would have impacted it, or they might have done something different had I not said I would put it in. So, but but that's all I know about it. When was the deadline?
I believe April, is it the 20th? It was,
Did you guarantee them the money, Bruce? Or
So I
did you
said
just?
that I said I would put it in as a line item, so maybe they didn't apply because I told them I put it in as a line item. But I don't know, I can't tell you when that conversation occurred. But
Did you let them know that it wasn't a guarantee that you would put it in and then it would
Yeah,
have to be
no,
passed?
no, it was not guaranteed.
Can you enlighten us on this situation at all? You know,
In terms of late application?
yeah, when they made the application.
They did not.
We didn't.
They did not make an application at all.
Yeah, they did last year.
They did last year. How much did they receive last year?
6,000 something.
And you know why they didn't make an application?
I'm thinking it might have been because I told them this year we would do a line item. I think that may have been, but
I think that,
Timing was really close
Yeah.
between our deadline and when they.
I understood
Okay,
they
so it
made
comes
the
out of
decision
Bruce's
before
salary.
that.
I'd also be comfortable with it, just going through this year with the understanding that if they wanted this money in the future, that yes, they do need to go before I'm sorry, I can't remember.
Community grants.
The community grants. I'll write it on
Yeah,
my
no,
hand.
it's on page 32. Well, do we have a consensus? I mean, I think we battered it around. As far as I'm concerned, I don't think that they should be a line item in the budget, but if you're.
I understand your opinion, and I respect it, Richard. I happen to have a different one.
I have a question with funding it, frankly, at all, because I knew, as George mentioned a couple of meetings ago, that plastic's going to come back in with the tide, and
But that's exactly why we need to get it cleaned up before it goes back out and winds up somewhere else.
But doesn't that make it more of an ongoing public works project rather than?
Frankly, I don't care who does it. It's just something that I feel is something that beaches need to start addressing. I may be alone in this opinion, but I feel quite strongly about it.
That it should be cleaned up and, and it's just like housework. It's just something that needs to be done. But I do have a problem with it being a line item. That's the only thing. It's something that needs to be done.
I'm just voicing
I
my
don't know.
opinion. If the rest of the group differs from me, I'll just, bring this up again next year. I'm not going away.
Well, they should apply for a community grant next year. For various reasons why they didn't.
So does the state have any responsibility?
Well, go ahead, because I think there
That's
is
just a
some.
question. I have no idea.
Well, the
It's a
beaches,
state park.
it's,
Beaches is a
yeah,
state
the
park.
beaches are the states.
But, I don't have a problem with the concept of us funding it, but I really think there's a mechanism that the city has set up. They've used it before. They should have used it this year, and they didn't, and I don't feel responsible for that.
Whether there's a line item, there ought to be a contract.
Yeah, because I mean,
Identifies what they're going to do, who's going to do it, what the timing are, what the
And they
penalties are.
did make a presentation of this budget committee 4 or 5 years ago, and we told them to go through the
Yeah.
community service, which they did. And so I think that's the place for it.
They chose not to this time.
I agree with Brandon, but I also feel like I don't think it should be a line item right now. There's nothing to say that the council could not make a grant from its own, out of the general fund, just one-time kind of thing. So there are still other mechanisms that we could use if that was something we decided.
Well, even the executive department has a discretionary.
Yeah, we got some ways to do that. I mean, it's not a big amount. And
Because of the dollar value, Sam?
yeah.
Yeah.
But I really support Sea Turtles and what they do. Not so much for the fact that they clean up a little plastic off the beach, but the message they sent while they do it. I think that's very important. But I agree. I don't think it should be a line item.
Okay, can we have a show of hands who wants to eliminate the line so we can get a consensus and we're going to eliminate it from the budget as a line item? Okay. So I think that's, the consensus is we're going to take this off as a line item. If the city wants to, if the council wants to spend it out of some other fund or some other line, that's their prerogative.
And that's what I support also. I agree with Sam. You know, I would not want to see them not get their money because they thought that by Bruce telling him he's going to put it in our budget, that now it was guaranteed, and that's the reason they didn't apply. I wouldn't want that to have, you know, be the case. So I would like to see them get the money. I just don't feel that it should be a line item.
And I think we should encourage them for next year that we somehow, you know, roll that into what we do as a city, whether it's a partnership with Public Works or with HRAP, and have that effort done each year, because even though it is a state, you know, state park or whatever, it's our brand here. I mean, people come here for the beach, and, you know, I've walked the beach quite a lot in the last couple of months, and it's really discouraging to see plastic all over the beach. And yes, it will maybe wash out, but it'll come back again, and it'll go out again. But, you know, you have to kind of make an effort.
Okay, let's move on. We don't want to get this done and go home happy. Does anybody have any other issues? I think the next issue that I have is on page 36. We've talked a lot about the HRAP. I believe that's in here. The emergency planning. Isn't that on page 36? Do we have? Oh, no, that's not, sorry, no, it's not. Okay. So, let's go to, does anybody else have any? I'm just kind of flip through this.
With emergency managers,
So that's 42, page 42. 106,000 for code enforcement. You've had some.
Can we go back on parks? And I think this was a discussion we had last time
What page
about,
is that?
I'm sorry, page 39.
Okay.
The Parks and Trail Master Plan, I think we had discussed that that money was really for a project. So if there is another designation in the budget.
It goes into like a capital project or something?
It's my understanding from what was said last week, it was a project based on the master plan. It's not development of a master plan. It's an actual project.
It's like a trail?
It's some undetermined project yet, but so we had
Should
talked
we just
about
call it should we just call it a trail?
we had talked about designating that as being a project still to be determined from the master plan. And I don't know how you state that in here,
Just
but
call it Parks Development.
park development.
Master plan project.
Yeah.
39.
39.
Okay, so we just need to rename that to master plan project?
To have a new
if I
line
can,
in there.
if I make a suggestion, just add the word "from," so it says park,
No,
park and trails from master plan, parentheses, TBD.
But it's going to be a new line in there, because you can't just rename that line, because in the past, aren't
Okay,
those
okay.
master plans.
So Lori's got to create another line in there. Okay. Everybody in agreement with that? Just basically a name. Okay.
Just go back to 36 for a minute. Planning,
Which page?
36, the planning department. I think this was discussed in one of the previous meetings, and I've lost, I just put a question mark next to it. Down about the middle, there's consultant professional fees, 45,000. Can somebody refresh my memory as to what that was?
Land use attorney.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the next item, unless somebody else says something else, was on page 42, we have $106,000 included in Jason's budget for the code enforcement officer. And my only comment is that I asked Bruce a little while ago, in the budget for the building official, there's a mention in the backup, the budget backup, that we may terminate our contract with Manzanita. And Mark also said that we are issuing fewer building permits than had been anticipated. So my question is the building official fully funded or fully employed? And if not, would it make sense for him at least the first year to be code enforcement? And that's just a question.
Smart.
Wow. There is some code enforcement work that the building official does, but it's a kind of a narrow, specialized part of that. It doesn't really get at the other types of code enforcement you've heard tonight, short-term rentals, things like that. Not surprisingly, is building code related only. That's Alden's area of expertise. The agreement with Manzanita, I had urged us to get out of that, and instead, I think we're going to go forward with that, and I'm persuaded that that's the right thing to do now. So unless Manzanita wants to end that agreement, we've budgeted it into this budget. If we do run a shortfall on permits this year, and we are running a little bit less than last year, unless that really drops off the table, we'll still be able to fully fund Alden's position at a full-time rate without going into the general fund. With the Manzanita contract and even at a reduced level of permits, we're still able to fund his position. If that falls further, then you'd have to look at either reducing Alton's time to a part-time employee or dipping into the general fund for that. But right now, our projections are that there's enough money between Manzanita and the building permit revenue at the rate it's been coming in to fully fund his position.
And there's enough work
Yes.
for a full-time employee between Manzanita work and work here in Cannon Beach?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I guess, is there any other comments? If you want to go ahead and go on with this page as proposed by the city manager.
I do.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. And on page 45, I think we have the E-Prep full-time management. Is there any further discussion on that? I think it's been kind of mixed conversation tonight, so everybody in agreement that we should hire a E-Prep full-time manager?
Do you want a show of hands, nods?
I think if there's enough.
Ear wiggle?
You got to pull your ears.
I'm in support of it.
I haven't heard that many people say they're against it, so unless there's 5 of us that are against it, I think it's.
I like the idea of a part-time person. That's not awesome.
That's the kind of thing that I was, thinking, well, I don't feel strongly enough pro or against because we do have it's not like we have nobody. We don't have a full-time person. We have a part-time person. So we are addressing it. We're just not addressing it to the extent that we could. I would sooner, I guess, put that back in the hands of staff. If I want to see some cuts, are they willing, is that something they would cut before something else? Rather than I say, I want to see that happen or not happen.
I guess one question would be, if we have a full-time emergency manager, do we put a condition on that person has to live in town? Because if they're 15 miles up the highway, it's not going to help much.
No, they're going to help tremendously by putting in place a plan that we will all implement, whoever's here or whatever, and then there's going to be things that it's not the first day, it's going to be the contractors that come in, all those kind of things. I think that you could possibly put in a requirement, if you're willing to assist, in the cost of, the difference in the cost of living in Cannon Beach versus other communities.
Cost would go way up then.
Well, yeah, and that's.
Way up.
Right, so it's either you, and some people may want to do that, but if somebody's going to come in, you're going to say, well, we're going to pay you $60,000, and then you have to live in the community, well, then they're going to get a job at McDonald's, because they're going to pay so much to live here. So, yeah, you can require something like that. I think to be reasonable, you have to say, okay, and you will subsidize that. But we're not looking to have the emergency manager be the person that is out there running around saying, this is what we do. They will get the plan in place, whoever we're going to have available, it won't be everybody, we'll start it, but it's going to be a plan, it's probably at least 6 months long, that we will know who to call, when people are going to come in, whatever. It's much more than just the person on the ground nothing's gonna get organized till day three. Mostly it's gonna be ad hoc in the first couple of days, and we're just trying to save people. But after that, when we're talking about really responding, it's about day three.
And didn't you say that to hire this person, it's really only going to, this first year, is only going to be an additional 39,000?
Yeah, because.
So it's not really the whole,
Right, we'd eliminate the contract,
but,
and we already have a $15,000 or $30,000 project, a person in the budget that we never filled. So it would be the difference between those two, and I don't think it would be a total savings either, because we still need to have somebody, if it's going to be a consultant or, you know, as we said, we're not even checking with the cash sites. So this would be a huge upgrade with a small increase in the budget.
this year, and then we can see how it works and what.
But it would be, if we stayed with the same model that we have now with the consultant and the other position, it would, if we continue those on, it would be $39,000 a year is the difference.
Jason, did you contemplate this position to assist with the CERT and MRC? Oh, okay, thanks.
Any, I think the consensus here is that we're going to hire a full-time e-print managers. Anybody opposed to that at this point? Okay. We got copies on page 53. We got copies this week of the ordinances, and Sam, you talked about building up a balance, and you want to have like a whole year's worth of money saved up. But the way I read the ordinance, it doesn't say that we're going to build up a balance. It says we're going to spend the money every quarter. And so I guess my question is there any way that we can legally build up a balance? I mean, I don't know how much you can build up, but it seems like we're not spending it every year. Do we have any issues with building up, Lori, do you know? Program, can we?
I think it's just when you spend it, you have to spend it on what is allowed.
We could save it up for 5 years or whatever, or no?
Yes.
We don't have
We
Pardon
can
me?
save it.
We don't have to
Yeah, we
save
can.
it. We can save it.
Okay, all right.
But it's true
My
that,
only question is, it seems like we're building a reserve, and I don't know what kind of restrictions there might be on it.
I know reserve is the terminology that we use. My thinking is we're just getting the timing better so that when we do pay it all, it happens from last year's money instead of the money we might be getting. So that's kind of what it is. It is a reserve, yes. That's the way it works
Kind
out.
of cash flow.
And so the intent would be that when there's enough reserve there, whatever terminology you'd use, you could give the awardees the 100% of what they're getting at the beginning, or not have them wait all the way
Yes.
to the end of the year when they've already expended.
Right, their money is guaranteed, so they don't have to worry.
yeah, I think we need to relook at that 8-year-old ordinance and probably reword it to allow more flexibility. The way it reads, it says that 70%, doesn't use a dollar, it just says 70% will be allocated by the Tourism and Arts Commission. But the council has the final say. So if they allocate the full amount, then when it comes back to council, the council could say, well, we're going to cut it back. But that's not really a very good plan, because now we have to decide as a council who we're going to cut back. I think the ordinance needs to be changed such that if we want to have a certain amount set back, that the committee knows that right up front, and therefore they only allocate what is designed to be allocated, and not allocate more than that, because it pretty much ties the council's hands. If they decide to allocate the full 70%, then there won't be a reserve.
Or if we build up the reserve, and right at the beginning of the budget process, we can allocate a certain amount. They can make their plans. And make their-
If we change the ordinance reads now that they get 70%, they allocate 70%, that's their charge.
The process has been, that they have within themselves. been
Right,
allocated
exactly.
As a reserve.
Right,
They've actually been leading the charge.
right.
Okay, all right. Okay, the next one that I have is just, it's a question mark, is the affordable housing. We had it in the budget last year. You know, you're basically repeating what, oh, I'm sorry, 62?
Thank you.
So we had it in the budget last year. The council decided that they weren't going to proceed with the program. Sam pointed out that in the strategic plan, that's one of your primary goals, is to go forward with that. You're building up a reserve at this point from building official funds, so you are creating some kind of a fund that you might be able to fund this with partially. But it does put the city in debt, which I think several of us have an issue with that. It would be my opinion that we leave it as proposed, and the city council makes a decision what they're going to do. But
I personally, I don't see the debt actually happening if there's a business plan back up.
And I agree with that.
That would be the only reason to do it, to show that the debt is something that would make itself. But if we haven't budgeted for it, then you can't do it.
can't do it. So my opinion is, you know, we let the council decide.
Yes.
Somebody else might have other opinions. So.
I don't think there's a downside to that because you're not taking monies from another source. It's all kind of self-contained within this fund, so it then becomes a council decision in terms of whether they want to proceed or not.
Well, in that sense. And the fund that we're already accruing is going to happen no matter whether this goes forward or not.
Well,
From
at some
the
point, we have to
1%.
decide what to do with it.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is one of the reasons that, you know, that I really feel we need to have some reserves, because this is an issue that's going to take money, and we're not going to solve this. There's some other small things we can do, but it really is going to take some money to solve affordable housing. And if we don't start putting money aside to do that, and more than what we're getting out of this excise tax on construction.
You guys, you can't find an interested third party that would partner with you somehow in this.
That's actually very possible, Richard.
Richard, I wanted to comment that I thought I didn't understand the number on the rents. It says 24,000.
I think that's a half a year, isn't it?
This was a best guess on people that were available, you know, like our own staff to go ahead and sort this out. I think the meeting the last time when Mark was talking about this, and I concur with his recommendation that if we are going to move forward, we need to bring somebody in that really understands this and do a real pro forma. So we're talking about real numbers as far as what the likely rents are, you know, on all those kind of things.
With this, Mark, this was the half year's rent, wasn't it, the 24,000?
Yeah, it was based on a guess, developing it in the first 6 months, renting.
So you're looking at $800 per month per unit times 5 units?
You're actually boiling down to more detail than we ever got to.
I think that's what it works out to.
There has been no pro forma. These were just numbers that when it first came out, it was like, we think this is what it might be. We don't necessarily.
Silly me.
Pardon?
Silly me.
Go ahead.
So this is really just a placeholder.
It's really a placeholder for the council to decide how they're going to proceed. Any other comments on that section? Okay, on page 65 is where we have a change at the bottom, where we now have a $329,077 contingency. We're going to drop that to $129,077, and we're going to transfer to the general fund $200,000. Is that correct?
I think Lori had mentioned something about making more in contingency and not do the transfer to the reserve fund, the RV reserve fund. So instead of taking it all out of contingency, remove the transfer to the RV reserve of 120 and then adjust the contingency line accordingly. Is that what you suggested, Lori?
Yeah, but there's nothing in that reserve now, so it needs to have something, it seems to me. It's down to like $6,000 or something, isn't it?
Penciled it out, it would be transfer to the general fund, 200,000, what I thought I heard, and then that would leave contingency at 249.
If we didn't do 120 to the reserve.
Oh.
Yeah.
But why would, I don't know why we wouldn't do that. What's gonna go wrong over there?
We don't know. What's going to go wrong, Karen?
Right now, there's things going wrong, and fuel prices have gone way
But that's
up.
not gonna come out of contingency. Aren't you gonna charge more for it?
Yes, but we have to budget the expenditure. So if our expenditures go up, we have to have.
By 120,000 more?
They're not that, there's buildings there that are not maintained, there's other things.
Spent $700,000 over there.
Well, that was like infrastructure, did we spend the money on buildings?
We did on the restrooms were totally redone.
What's the new number, 249?
Yeah, a lot of stuff.
The pool was done.
What's the new number?
In my opinion,
Yeah,
we-
it's
we
249,
really
'cause we're
reserve it.
taking
Always pull it back out.
100,
No,
Why?
so
If it's for a
basically,
building, it
So
fails.
once you put the money in the reserve funds, it has to stay there. It's gonna stay.
okay, so they're not gonna make this transfer, you know?
All right, I'm only reading.
Much less flexible.
Recap.
Does
Recap,
that
please.
make sense with everybody?
No.
Would you?
One more
Recap,
time.
recap that, please.
So the numbers would change at the bottom of the page where it says transfer to the general fund, 200,000. Transfer to the RV park reserve, 0. And the contingency would then be 249,500 or $625 or something like that, or $15, right? What's that number add up to, Larry?
Okay, transfer to the general fund is 200.
249,615, I think.
And we're not putting any in reserve,
Nothing in reserve.
RV reserve, okay. 249,615.
Okay. Any other changes on that page that you're going to renew
Contingency.
or you're going to review the contract, Bruce, and make that all work? 76, the next one I have is 76, which is the water fund, and I think that we talked about the other day about the rate study a little bit. I think George, and also on page 81, there's two amounts, I think 5,000 on page 81. So there's $15,000 set aside basically for the Public Works Committee to work with an outside party to come up with a new rate structure. Everybody okay with that? George, you were questioning that?
Yeah, it was one of the things that I did X out on my list here. And are you talking about the top of page 76, the rate study?
Yeah, the rate study amount, right.
Yeah.
Well, what's on 81?
And if you have page 81, there's 5,000 at the very bottom of the page. That's
The rate
reasonable.
study.
Rate study.
Well, it's just, they're tied together. They're basically this, they want to spend $15,000 to hire somebody to help them with a rate study.
And what about the 5,000?
That's part of
It's
it.
split between the two enterprise funds, the water and the wastewater.
But just for a total of 15?
All of 15,000.
Same person.
Okay.
And they're tied together because the water and the sewer are charged out together.
So Carolyn, what's your opinion there?
I think it's, what's that? I think we need to do it. I mean, I think it's something that's going to continue to impact our community because we're talking about a big master plan for both water and wastewater. And I think it's important to make sure that we have the correct rate structure for our community. And I mean, the structure itself has not been revisited for many years. We increased the rates last year, but used the exact same structure that we have now. And I think that's important to do.
I guess my sense is we did review that. You know, we looked at different options for rate structure when we were going through this. And I guess I come back to the parking study we had done. In spite of the fact that it was a professional parking study, we didn't go with it. We didn't, because it wasn't acceptable here to this community. So I'm wondering if that $15,000 wouldn't tell us what we should do, but it may not work for us. It may not be what's acceptable in this community.
Well, I think what the difference is this time is that the community members via the Public Works Committee is going to have an input on the different options for structure. And that didn't happen last time. And I think that is a shortcoming from the last time around that we didn't look wide enough in terms of the options for the rate structure.
We need to have a sellable rate structure,
Yes.
because we're gonna be looking at still significant rate increases for the next 5 years and beyond. So better try to get it right now.
I agree with that.
Okay?
I think the decision ultimately would be made on politics and not on studies.
I mean, that's possible, but I think if we have if we have the information, everyone at least will be able to see what the different options that were considered, and then you're right, it's probably gonna be made on public.
Also, George, what's being proposed, it is the community determining what's going to be looked at. And these funds are not necessarily for somebody to do the study, it's for them to go ahead and do the computer runs, to go ahead and determine what the impacts are to different, categories of customers. So it's totally driven by the Public Works Committee as to what kind of things are going to be looked at.
Which I think in turn could lead to some fairly innovative rate structures.
Right.
We don't have to have one rate structure.
This is taking it out of the hands of the consultant and putting it in the hands of the folks here. I like it.
Any other comments there, unless there's a question or legal where it is? Okay. My next page that I have a question about is on page 107.
Richard, you had brought it up a couple times now on page 78, the alternative to the pressure tank.
Karen addressed that. And I think she had, in her passion speech, I think
She reached you?
No, but she addressed the issue, and since she looked into it, and, she thought she had it solved for a reasonable number. So I'm trusting Karen to go forward with that. Okay?
And, the reality is in terms of the projects that need to get done in the water capital improvement plan, there's a whole lot of them. And if this one comes in at the price of the other option, which was about half of this, then there's still going to be projects for the rest of that money.
There's lots of projects.
There's lots of projects.
Yeah. So I'm happy with the answer she gave us. So my next question would be on page 107, and that's the financial contractual services. And Bruce, you and Lori talked about that was going to be staffing and more CPA-type staff in the accounting and finance department. Could you elaborate a little bit on that, what's going on or why?
Right now, the only CPA we have in finance is Lori. And we recognize, we have some technical people that are there that can do things, but we need some more, I don't know if you want to call it accounting, CPA horsepower or whatever. So this could be accomplished either by contract or preferably maybe by a reclassification if the opportunity came up. But that's what that.
So somebody with a little stronger educational background, accounting or something?
Bachelor's degree
Yeah,
in
okay.
accounting.
So this isn't anything definite that you're doing, this is, you're trying to make
We're just
room?
looking at our options right now and
Okay,
trying to,
all right. I understand, all right. Any other questions on that? I guess the last one, software first, the backup. And it just seems to me, and I believe you that you're not backing everything up, but you're also proposing a totally redundant system somewhere off-site. Is that correct?
We've budgeted for a totally redundant system, but we are also going to look at like a cloud system. And what our comparisons, in the discussions I've had with Rusty is that you can do a cloud system and then you've got the ongoing cost with it, or you can go ahead and have another place that your stuff is just saved to with redundant servers, and then you've got the initial capital expense with a very low ongoing cost.
So we own all that stuff somewhere.
We would own that someplace else. But it's whichever one is the more cost effective and over time is the one that we would go with.
Okay.
When you say we would own it,
I have to believe you at some point.
Yeah, I know, it's so hard to believe.
It's just impossible for me to believe it.
Yes.
It's just really hard to get my arms around the fact we're not backing anything up.
would you mentioned the cloud, and maybe this is the same thing as leasing, going out to one of these server farms and leasing space. That's separate.
That's basically what you're doing, right?
Right, well, that's one way to do it. If that's less expensive than actually having our own, we back up. When my last job, we backed it up to another location, and we own the servers. But in that case, we actually would relocate there if we had a problem, if there was a storm or something, and then that way we wouldn't need the internet. We would actually be tied to the servers that were there. But
You look at all these.
we're going to look at all the options, but it's just, I'm just trying to say there's a need.
Okay, I don't have any other questions about the budget or things that we've discussed unless anybody else has comments?
Nothing specific, but back to my general thing, and that is I would like to see us, this is something that Bruce addressed at the last meeting, and it's the top of his list this meeting. We have low general fund balance, and I also see that in our contingencies. We have a lot of contingencies that are around to 5 and 6%, which to me is just not very comfortable. I would like to see our contingencies up to between 10 and 15%, and I would like to see our staff go back and see how they can make that happen.
We can do that, George. We can look at it. I can tell you that one of our goals is to make sure we're better than what we have been in the past, to be able to do that. And I don't know what kind of impacts it would potentially have to go ahead and make those numbers work. And also, depending on the size of the department, to go from a 5% to a 10%, there's a lot of changes. So if that's the consensus to go through that exercise, but that is an exercise that Lori and I went through with each one of the department heads, and we got the same kind of answers, because we went after an awful lot of stuff that we were talking about with Karen, and we ended up in the same way. Same thing with IT, same thing with police. So if there's a point you want us to reach, we can go and try to achieve that. But I think that we're going to be tight on what we've got in order to be able to get there. So I don't know how much we would be able to accomplish. If that's the intent, we can do that.
So
Go ahead.
so the 124,000 that would be left over from the 200,000 that we're transferring from the RV park fund, where would that go into?
The general fund.
Okay.
The general fund. And also, George, understanding that, because I definitely share the concern. One thing, it sounds like a simple step, but even to repurpose the funds that we had that were set aside for buildings, we are in a different situation than before we had that discussion, because that was not of value to helping the general fund because it has specific purpose. Changing it is a significant difference now, because now that reserve is up to 1.3 million. And then with what was discussed, at the beginning of the meeting, we're talking about putting even more money into that.
So that's one of the things we haven't discussed. You were talking about recharacterizing that
As a general.
number.
Yes.
And we would do that in the budget?
I don't know wherever that fund is, and we're putting the money aside, we're calling it a general fund reserve for the buildings.
General.
Yeah, but we would just categorize it as a general reserve.
So it's still in the same category?
I think the change probably has to happen in the strategic plan, because that's where it says this is where this money is going.
It's going to stay where it is. We're not going to do anything internally with the budget to change the recharacterization of that 400,000.
For the 13. It's 1.3 million.
The whole 1.3.
Yeah, the whole 1.3 would now be the general fund reserve, not set aside for the relocation of the.
That would take council action.
Pardon?
that would take council
Yeah,
action.
and Jeff,
So it can stay where it is, we're just gonna recharacterize the one thing.
Well, what, 800,000 is characterized as what- relocation, and the other money, the 500,000 is just there. It doesn't have a characterization.
So what page is?
Mechanic is, I don't know if you put the money in and change the name or however it's gonna be, but all of those funds, the 800 plus what we're gonna put in this year will become true general fund reserve,
So it's,
not to set aside the building.
How many months, how many months does that represent in terms of city operating,
Part three?
citywide with that right now, right?
Pardon?
The 1.3 plus the 124,000. So say 1.4 is all we have then.
If we didn't make this change, we would have zero. But I'm sure we would make that change if we were in that kind of circumstance, we would just go ahead and do that. But again, I think the restriction is actually in the strategic plan.
So it's on page 48, there's where we are.
Pardon?
It's on page 48.
Yeah.
So you're just gonna recharacterize,
I think if we take away the strategic plan requirement, I think we're going to be okay. And I think the name is okay, other than its purpose, the strategic plan.
so to summarize the changes we've made, any other comments?
I have
You
a,
might have something to say.
not on this part, I just, a more general question on any of these department budgets, back to the contingency. You put contingencies in case you exceed your budget and you need flexibility. What happens when you don't spend all your money at the end of the year? You have, where is that money?
Beginning from the,
It's just gonna, it's not gonna,
End balance, goes to end balance, right?
and that number's always bigger than we budget, always.
Yes.
Carried forward.
Carried
within
forward.
The fund that created
Okay, we're not
the
gonna,
ending balance.
so we're not gonna use that to fund any additional reserves.
Well, that is your beginning fund balance. So that starts it, and then any funds that we get from the, tax money or
We could
whatever
use
goes
that.
on top of that.
Go into
Now, we could, for example, this year I think the number's around 900. We decided to go ahead and say, well, let's put 200 aside out of that into the reserve. We can do that, and then that beginning balance becomes 700. Yes, say yes. It's a concept. I can't answer your question unless I have a long time to get the answer. But just if conceptually that money could be put into the general account.
I frankly don't know what you guys are talking about.
Well, neither do we.
But I don't think you can do that, then you'd have to do that in next year's budget.
Let's start.
yes, that started the next year.
Yeah, when we start.
Are you talking about a specific fund?
He's talking about if you have a bigger than anticipated beginning fund balance next year, then you take some of that and earmark it into the general reserve. But you wouldn't do that until the budget process next year. You couldn't do it on this year. Right.
Just carry it
You know,
over,
next year, I mean,
the next budget committee.
Which would then take it to the year after that, so the
Right.
conflict
The
is
first,
not-
the first meeting Lori and I had to sit down to go ahead and start the budget, the first thing I asked her for was patience, and said that I'm going to drive you crazy, and it's not on purpose, because I'm concept and you are detail.
And did he achieve that?
I think, yeah, well, you heard her right now.
We
she's
made it
got-
work.
Yeah, I mean, we made it work. It was solid, but it was like, don't give me pennies, just give me big numbers,
Sorry I asked.
That's how
Did you get your question answered, hopefully?
we just don't spend it, we don't get to keep it.
I got an assortment of answers, I picked one I like.
Pick the one you like.
You're a conceptual guy.
That's right.
Okay, before we go to public comment, I'd just like to summarize the changes we've made. We removed the sea lions forever.
Turtles.
See, Lions.
Yeah, but we need to do public comment too. I just thought we'd go through, just to make sure we're all in agreement.
Harriet screaming from here.
Yeah. Say whether numbers moving around.
Well, it's
back and
just-
forth.
But we've already done that, haven't we?
No.
You have to
That's the
make a
motion.
formal motion.
Well, but the motion is to Well, I think we've agreed to all the changes. One was the line for sea turtles, not sea lions, sea turtles forever.
That's
The
just
other-
eliminated.
The other was to add 2,000 from the RV Park Reserve Fund. 200,000 to the general fund, and remove the transfer 129,000, whatever the number was,
120.
from the RV Park to
149.
the RV Park Reserve. And then you're gonna recharacterize the general fund reserve, but no dollars change hands there. That's all I've got.
And change the contingency amount in the RV reserve fund.
Oh, you mean the seven, that's not gonna go to the,
It's gonna be contingency, it's gonna say contingency and not go to the RV reserve.
Because there were three changes there. We were going to take $200,000 and transfer it to the general fund. We were going to remove the transfer
We missed
to the
that.
RV reserve fund. And then the contingency amount was going to be different
Was
than what's in there now, and that number would change.
yeah, but it wouldn't go into the general fund.
No.
No, but it would change.
stay as a contingency and not reserve, not
Yeah,
RV.
well, but the other change, and there's one other change, and that's well, we made the trail fund, not just a line, but we also made the change on the chamber.
Right,
Okay.
right.
And that was 76,000 out of the general fund. And then we do, I think we already, that's page, page is the general. Hmm?
These are the numbers here. This will change, and then this will go to the general.
Right, okay, so it's on page 56. I think I already made that change. So that goes to, the line that was 120,000 goes to 84,665. And tourist promotions, which was 264,655, goes to 300,000. Okay, so that should summarize all the changes we're going to make.
If I can make a suggestion, that when you're ready to make a motion, that Lori suggests a motion that somebody can say, that covers all these things. And then somebody can say so moved or not, but instead of going all the way through it again, let's first tell what they are.
So where does the 76,000, that's the other part of the visitor center fund, where does that go?
It's in, there's a line for it from last year. It's on page 56.
Yeah, it'll go into the visitor, there'll be
No,
another
not
line.
No.
56, not 56. It was in the general fund.
It comes
But
out of
there
the
was,
general.
but there was a line from last year.
So will that, Lori, will that go back to the community programs page where it was last year?
Yeah.
Okay,
It's $75,345.
okay,
The
Exactly.
Chambers of Commerce, it's
But
this,
yes, that's where it will land.
Okay.
on page 32,
Yeah,
that's where the
yeah,
76,000.
yeah,
whatever, 70,
yeah, right here.
That's for.
Oh, the Chamber Visitors
So
Center. that was
now,
70.
does anybody have any questions about what
Yes.
we've just done, because we need to open the floor to public comment?
Yeah, I have a question how that chamber money will be distributed. Because it is a 70% issue, and it comes in quarterly, so they're going to be getting 70% each quarter,
70%
and
of the quarter minus 20,000.
minus,
We would take out their portion of the visitor center before we remitted the money to them.
well, I say, anyway, it gets a little complicated in that what I think we decided was that the information center would be guaranteed of the money. The promotion fund then would get whatever is left. If we reach the 300,000 level, then they would get the full 300. If we don't, they might get less than the full 300. If they get more, it would cap at 300. Is that That's the way we designed it. I think we,
I think that's going to be in this contract,
right, okay.
okay? Do we have public comment about,
My name is Kevin Ridgway. I am 3527 South Hemlock. I chair the Chamber's Destination Marketing Committee. Just a couple of comments. It's been really interesting listening to all the conversation tonight and realizing how much the city needs in order to provide the services that the residents demand, and quite rightly so too. We are a community that is totally dependent on the visitor economy. So the work that the industry does, our accommodation partners, our retail partners, our galleries, plus the work that we do at the Destination Marketing Committee is absolutely critical in providing those funds to the city to enable you to create the budget that you're working on tonight. Last quarter, as an example, the funds went up by 16%. That's pretty incredible. And that's only because of the work that we're doing from a destination marketing perspective. So I would encourage you to keep that in mind as you go to the approval process of the budget. And I would also like you, when we get into the negotiation stage, to look at the multi-year concept. From a destination marketing perspective, we plan a year or two out. We can't look at 1 year. We gamble, quite frankly, because we have to commit funds for next year, even though we don't know that we've got a contract. So the concept of a multi-year contract is really important to us. The other comment I want to make is that the Chamber's making an investment in a very important process, and that's called a destination management studio. The destination management studio talks about the quality of life that we all want to have as residents of Cannon Beach. So at our initial listening sessions that were held in 6 communities in Clatsop and Tillamook County, we talked about affordable/workplace housing. We talked about traffic congestion and how to deal with that. And we talked about the environmental issues on our beaches and on our trails. So from a destination marketing perspective, we are really interested and want to make sure that whatever we do doesn't impact the quality of life of all of us that live here. The outcome of the Destination Management Studio, likely at the end of this year, there'll be more meetings to come up once we get past the summertime period, will be the creation of action teams. There will not be a strategic plan that gets put on a shelf and ignored. There will be action teams created. And this happened when we went through the same process or a similar process with the North Coast Food Trail. And if you stop by the Chamber's office, you will see some of the outcomes that have come from that. So these action teams will be made up of people that are interested in any of the topics that 3 of which I've mentioned. There are others on the table too. And what I really want to encourage is that when these sessions are, when you're notified of these sessions, both from a council perspective and from a resident perspective, we encourage both council members and residents to participate in them. Because, again, from a destination marketing point of view, yeah, we've got all the expertise from the accommodation sector and retail and galleries, etc. But we want to have that balance with residents in terms of what we do through this destination management studio. So I'd encourage you to participate in that. Thank you. Yeah, I did.
Thanks, Kevin. Sorry.
Jan Siebert-Worman, P.O. Box 778, Cannon Beach. I just wanted to ask you all if you could find some way to put something, at least something in the budget for the purchase of the old elementary school site. We have been really, waiting quite a while for this, and I thought it was moving forward with the survey question. I thought the answers that the people who did turn in the survey seemed very positive about that site, about purchasing that. I know it's complicated, but it is a very visible entryway to our town. It has high significance historically with the Native American village that was there, and I just really ask you to find something in the budget this year that could put money toward that purchase and let the school district know that we really do want to purchase it. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet.
Good evening, Greg Swedenborg, 188 West 2nd Street. I have 3 points I want to talk about tonight, and 2 of them, my disclaimer, I'm president of the board of the chamber, as well as a lodging partner in town, as well as on the TAC committee. So those are the functions that I play with the city and my personal life. The first 2 are chamber or the promotion management discussion oriented. And when we came here 2 weeks ago, we proposed a little bit different than what was talked about today, but basically, to echo what Kevin said, a 3-year contract because of all the reasons for planning and how money would be spent and the efficiencies. So a lot of when we went and figured out what could we do to do a good job, to do a job for the city as their DMO, how can we efficiently do that? A lot of the cost basis for that and how we're going to budget that was based on 3 years and gaining some efficiencies of that multiple year contract. So I would urge the council to look at that. I'm kind of gauging the talk tonight. No, that was not brought up at all. I think 300 is a good number, a very fair number. It worked within our high and low estimate of what we could do. But there wasn't much talk about the longevity of that contract. And I don't personally want to be back here in 9 months kind of going through the exact same thing. Last year we had that exact same conversation about 9-10 months ago, and the city attorney said, it's absolutely doable, you can do it, it's whether the council wants to do that. So I would urge the council to look at that as something. Comment 2 is, in this discussion, we've had a lot of conversations trying to figure out what we can do as a DMO, providing the promotional services for the city. And in part of that conversation, we talked with the chairman of the Oregon Tourism Commission and talked about where this money is coming from and how at that time the discussion was the visitor center was going to come out of the promotional budget. And we learned a few things that I'm not so sure this city is aware of. And I bring this up not to say anything about fund more promotion necessarily. I think it's important that the city knows that we talk a lot about the increase, 70%, 30%, and a 1% increase. Part of that law is also from 2003, whatever the city was paying for in promotions in 2003, they could not decrease that going forward. So we always talk about what essentially is the TAC money and the promotion money, but no one talks about the money that was being spent in 2003, which the only promotion the city was doing at that time was funding the visitor center. So if you take into account that aspect of it, there is actually more transient TLT money that can be spent on facilities, promotions, whatever that is under that guise. We estimate about $200,000. So it's something that we want to know that it's being looked at correctly. And third, so I'll take my chamber hat off and promote DMO hat off and really kind of talk from a citizen standpoint and a lodging partner standpoint. Councilman Benefield talked, a couple of comments about congestion and traffic and the spring and winter feel like the summer now. I would personally urge the council to really look at and it came up tonight, a possible another 1% for next year in the TLT dollars, look at some alternatives. The TLT funding, and I say this not because I'm a hotel lodging partner in town, because it's not my money. I just collect it and turn it over to the city from people who stay in the rooms. But it's extremely inefficient as it pertains to all the other topics you've been talking about tonight, waste, infrastructure, stuff around town. The city has assets that, the beach is not it because that's owned by the state and the people. The assets of the city of Cannon Beach are parking lots, our infrastructure and restaurants and businesses in town. So the congestion that you refer to is primarily people here for the day trippers. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, everyone talks about it, that don't contribute to the infrastructure of the city. There's a cost with throwing away their trash or public toilets or supplies in the bathrooms. You know, there's all kinds of things you could talk about. So I would urge the council, as you look forward and go forward, to look at the only two things I can think of to pull money out of that particular group is either sales tax on food and beverage, like Ashland and other cities have, or parking things, which I've been around town talking to a lot of people about. But that's how we can best utilize the assets that we have in this community. And I say that not to disrupt the character of Cannon Beach. I just think that if you look at the reality of Cannon Beach, 2,000 people cannot hold the 20 some odd thousand that come through on a daily basis, cannot pay for that infrastructure. And if you look at this weekend will be a perfect example. The city is 100% sold out Memorial Day weekend. You go downtown, it's going to be bonkers. You go downtown at 7 o'clock at night, all those hotels and lodging establishments are still sold out, but it's not going to be bonkers. It's the people that have gone for the day that we didn't get a dime out of are gone. And so I urge you to kind of look into alternative solutions. That's it. Oh.
Is it okay if I ask a question? Greg, as your hotel owner hat on, do you support changing the hotel room tax, being able to allocate it for other things like garbage service and restroom cleanup?
That's a state decision.
I understand
So-
that. I'm just asking from you as a hotelier, would you support?
No, I wouldn't. And the reason I wouldn't is because I believe it was put into place so municipalities couldn't just go back to the same old well over and over and over again. And I, quite frankly, think that's what we're doing here. And in 1993, when Ashland said we can't keep going back and back to the hotels, and over the years, because that's why Oregon put in those laws to make it efficient, so you have to look elsewhere for funding. And so I come from that standpoint. If you continue to do that, like I just mentioned, I think it's, quite frankly, very inefficient. Because you create this huge pot of money that the 70% of each increase you do every couple of years, that would have to go to promotion, and you're bound by what you can do it. Whereas other measures, it goes right into the general fund, and the city can figure out what they want to do with it.
Thank you. I appreciate your candor.
Sure. Any other questions?
Any
Thank you.
other public comment? Okay, not hearing any, we'll close the public comment. And I think Lori is going to read us something, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Suggest a motion based on your discussions. And I'm going to compartmentalize it by fund. So we'll start with the general fund. You are, so it would be, I move to, okay. We'll reduce the Sea Turtle line item of $7,000 to zero. And we are adding $200,000 to the general fund from a transfer in from the RV park. We're removing $10,000 from the parks budget line item where it says Parks and Trails Master Plan. We'll add a line that says $10,000 going to a project from Master Plan. We will add $75,345 to the Community Programs Department for the Chamber Visitor Center. That would be it for the general fund. Then we'll move on to the RV park changes, reducing the transfer to the RV park reserve, and that will be zero. So it was $120,538. That will go to zero. We're adding a general fund transfer out, $200,000. We're reducing contingency to $249,615. And then in the transient room tax fund, we're reducing the Chamber Visitor Center line to $84,655. And we're increasing tourism promotions to $300,000.
Would somebody like to make that motion that Lori just proposed?
So moved.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded, all in favor?
Hey, guys,
Yes.
just one clarification.
Yes.
Do we have to do anything about the change in the use of the general fund reserve, or do we just cover that of the strategic plan?
Yeah, I think we can do that separately outside the budget committee.
Constance, go ahead.
And I have a question too.
Yes, ma'am.
You're reducing the line, the sea turtles line to zero, but is there anything that can the city manager take discretionary money to fund that? We haven't, we didn't really have that.
Well, taking it out means you didn't budget for it, so.
So I thought the consensus was that you wanted to.
I think Sam talked about using some other mechanism that the city council could use to.
But that's something I'll bring back to council, because you took it out of the budget, so if we're going to do it, I would ask you on how you want to handle it.
It's been moved and seconded, all in favor?
Yes.
Opposed?
Aye.
Any comment?
Yes, I really, wanted to see us with more contingencies, and I felt that there's room to make that happen. So as my last vote is on the council and as the on the budget committee, I vote no.
Thank you.
Can I clarify one thing? I'm sorry. We might have to add some extra things to the motion. So when we make all those changes in the general fund, there'll be some excess ending fund balance. Do you want it to go to the ending fund balance or add to contingency?
I would add it to the ending fund balance, personally.
What's the consensus? Ending fund balance? Okay. So the cumulative effect of those changes in the general fund will go to the ending fund balance.
May I comment?
Okay, thanks.
If it went to contingency and you didn't use it, you could still put it in the ending fund balance, isn't that correct?
It would be a carryover to the next year.
So it wouldn't really,
Beginning fund balance.
Is contingency more flexible than ending fund balance?
Contingency is more flexible.
I would ask that we put it in contingency to accommodate what George is talking about, and also to have the flexibility of the use of those funds if necessary.
that's what I meant to move.
Pardon?
That's what I meant to move.
Okay.
Does everybody agree on that?
Yes.
Goes to contingency. Okay.
Did somebody make that motion?
I moved.
Okay, Jim made the motion, was there a second?
Seconded.
Okay, I'm not trying to run the meeting.
No,
I just
that's
wanna make
fine,
sure we
no
actually
problem.
voted.
I didn't know that we needed the motion, but that's.
No, it's a separate motion.
It's an amendment.
Separate motion, it's been moved and seconded, all in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So we've approved the budget. Lori, we have something I'm supposed to read now?
Yes, if you would, please. I think you've been doing it every year that I've been here, so
All right.
I like the sound of your
You're
voice.
getting good at it.
He-
Doesn't even have to
Okay,
read
this
it.
is budget committee action. Final approval of the fiscal year 2018-2019 budget document for the city of Cannon Beach. Approval of the fiscal year 2018-2019 proposed budget document include amendments by the Cannon Beach Budget Committee and submitting the approved budget to the city council and recommending adoption. Whereas pursuant to Oregon budget law, and after careful consideration, Cannon Beach Budget Committee has completed and approved a balanced budget for the city of Cannon Beach for fiscal year 2018-2019. Whereas the proposed fiscal year 2018-2019 budget contains best estimates for projected revenues and expenditures, and whereas the Budget Committee has reviewed all estimated revenues and expenditures for all city departments and funds for fiscal year 2018-2019, making modifications and changes where appropriate. Therefore, the City of Cannon Beach Budget Committee has approved and authorized the city to levy the permanent rate of .7049 per thousand of assessed value for the general fund, to levy $379,471,000 for bonded debt, and to levy .2590 per thousand of assessed value for the Cannon Beach Road District. After completing all obligations required under Oregon budget law, the Cannon Beach Budget Committee hereby approves the fiscal year 2018-2019 proposed budget as amended, comprised of revenues and expenditures for all city funds and departments, and submits the approved fiscal year 2018-2019 budget to the City Council for further consideration and recommended adoption. And this is approved by the Budget Committee on this 23rd day of May 2018.
That'll come to the city council in June.
June 12th.
And do we need to do, we don't do a motion or anything, this is just a
Yeah,
pronouncement, right?
You can make a motion to approve this budget committee action.
Okay, so we need a motion to approve what I just read.
I'll make a motion to approve the recommended budget committee action.
Okay,
Second.
it's been moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, I think we're done.
Thank you very much.
Richard, before we're done, we have to get a group photo.
Okay, but I'd like to express my appreciation to the city council, because you guys, besides these meetings and having prepared for these, you have 2 meetings a month that you have to prepare for and be ready and, be able to discuss things intelligently. And so I just want to give you my appreciation for what you guys do for the city. I think it's really important, and you do a lot of
Well, it's so much fun.
I'll pay my taxes.
I mean, it's a lot of work, a lot of work.
Thank you.
I do have a question. Are you going to be bringing the proposed extra 1% tax to the council?
If you want, I think the next step would be a workshop, so we can bring it to a workshop.
When you do that, you had this kind of spreadsheet looking at all the various options. You're going to do it on that basis?
And we'll have done more research on it also.
I'm going to adjourn the meeting.
So now for the photo, I'd like everybody